Chapter 2091. Facing two End-Realm experts, Xiao Xiao, Xiao Chen, Dao Ju, and Li Chun were in charge of blocking them. Only the four of them had the right to fight with End-Realm experts. Xiao Xiao, Xiao Chen, Dao Ju, and Li Chun worked together to block the two End-Realm experts of the Yin Ghost race. The others all found their own opponents and fought intensely. They thought that Li Chun and the others were just at the Dao realm and were just at the entry level. Such cultivation wouldn't be much of a threat to them at all. However, the two Yin Ghost race elders didn't expect Xiao Chen and the others to be so strong. The moment they clashed, the elder who was fighting with Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao punched out. A terrifying aura covered Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao as he hollered coldly, "Brats who are still wet behind the ears, you wanna fight with me? You are a few hundred years too young." The old man thought that his punch would be enough to severely injure or even kill Xiao Xiao and Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen had no intention of backing down. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand in an instant. He then slashed with the sword, and the blood-red sword aura clashed with the old man's fist. It was obvious that the old man had underestimated Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. As such, he did not use his full strength in that punch. It was not until his sword collided with Xiao Chen's blade that the old man realized his mistake. However, it was obviously too late by then, because Xiao Xiao had already appeared on the old man's left side without him noticing. She struck out with her palm, and a moonlight flashed and blasted toward the old man. Facing Xiao Xiao's attack, after the old man destroyed Xiao Chen's sword light, he didn't dare to stop and punched out once more. Only then was he able to force back Xiao Xiao's attack. At first, the old man thought that it would be easy for him to defeat Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao with his strength. However, after the first fight between the two, the old man realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. Although Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao seemed to be at the beginning of the Dao realm, their combat strength was far beyond this level. In fact, after a short exchange of blows, the old man was certain that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao's combat strength was not weaker than the great attainment of the Dao realm. Moreover, this was only shown in a single blow. It was still impossible to determine their true strength. It should have been a complete crushing result, but the two sides were evenly matched. After successfully blocking Xiao Chen and Zhao's attacks, the old man no longer looked at the two of them with disdain. A complicated expression flashed across his eyes as the old man said solemnly, "The Heavenly Plan Hall really put in a lot of effort. Since the End Realm experts can't enter, they actually found 4 geniuses. Do they want to use the combat strength of the highest Dao realm to destroy the Yin Ghost race?" After one move, the old man was sure that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were the geniuses of the Great Thousand World. This was because only geniuses could have the strength to fight against End Realm experts when they were still in the Dao realm. However, the Heavenly Plan Hall should only have one genius. Therefore, the old man thought that the Heavenly Plan Hall put in a lot of effort and didn't hesitate to find 4 geniuses to destroy the Yin Ghost race. It should be known that every monstrous prodigy basically represented the future of a powerful force. Moreover, only the top 10 Ling Tian sects had the ability to nurture a monstrous prodigy. In that case, apart from the monstrous prodigy in the Heavenly Policy Mansion, the other 3 monstrous prodigies were obviously recruited from the other Ling Tian sects. One could well imagine the price one would have to pay to get such a monstrous genius to take action, especially in an unknown lesser thousand world like the Wood World. The old man felt bitter about the Heavenly Plan Hall's determination to destroy the Yin Ghost race. So many years had passed. Did the Heavenly Plan Hall really want to destroy the Yin Ghost race so urgently? They didn't even wait for the space-time tunnel to stabilize. They would rather send out 4 geniuses to destroy the Yin Ghost race as soon as possible. With a self-deprecating laugh, the old man said in a deep voice, "Come on, let me see how strong the geniuses of the Great Thousand World are." As he said that, the old man's aura surged once again. It was obvious that he didn't underestimate Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao anymore. He took a step forward and instantly disappeared from the spot. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Xiao Chen without any warning. Black energy surrounded his iron fist as he punched out. His speed and power were much faster than before. Especially his power. The power that exploded out from his withered body was definitely enough to make one's heart race. Facing the old man's ferocious attack, Xiaochen raised his sword to block. However, the strong power still sent Xiaochen flying. After sending Xiaochen flying with a punch, the elder did not stop there. He flashed again and appeared before Xiao Xiao in the next moment. He threw a punch at Xiao Xiao as well. A crescent barrier appeared before Xiao Xiao, and the two collided. While Xiao Xiao successfully blocked the elder's punch, Xiao Xiao was sent flying by the elder's punch just like Xiaochen. The old man, who didn't underestimate Xiaochen and Xiao Xiao at all, revealed terrifying combat strength. His end realm cultivation totally exploded out at this moment. After sending two people flying, the old man said solemnly, "As geniuses, is this all you have? You can't even block one of my fists." Xiaochen felt a thick fighting spirit from the old man. Of course, Xiaochen didn't know that the old man only had a month left to live. Anyway, he was about to die. To be able to fight with the geniuses of the world before he died was a joyous matter. Xiaochen stopped in his tracks and smiled faintly. "Of course, I won't let you down," Xiaochen said as he sensed the intense fighting spirit emanating from the old man. Blood-red swords continued to coalesce around Xiaochen as he spoke. The swords burst, and the sword realm was unleashed, shrouding the old man and Xiao Xiao in a short time. Being enveloped by the sword realm, the old man felt an incomparably sharp intent, as well as streaks of terrifying sword chi. A weird expression flashed across his eyes, but then he became excited. "Sword body, you are the genius of the sword sect? I didn't expect that I would have a chance to fight with the sword body." Sword body, the top special body type. The old man knew about it. Moreover, through the sword body, the old man quickly determined that Xiaochen was from the sword sect. After all, in the old man's era, sword cultivators with the sword body were definitely disciples of the sword sect. This was because the other sword sects didn't have the ability to develop a sword body. Only the sword sect had such ability. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2092. When Xiaochen displayed the sword body, not only did the old man not show much fear, but his fighting spirit was even more awe-inspiring. He looked at Xiaochen and shouted coldly. At the same time, a terrifying aura gushed out. When Xiaochen displayed the sword body, not only did the old man not show much fear, but his fighting spirit was even more awe-inspiring. He looked at Xiaochen and shouted coldly. At the same time, a terrifying aura gushed out. Being enveloped by Xiaochen's sword realm, one could imagine the pressure that the old man was under. Moreover, the old man was not only facing Xiaochen, but also Xiao Xiao, who was also a supreme talent of the Great Thousand World. In all the years that they had known each other, Xiaochen had never seen Xiao Xiao go all out. However, this time, Xiao Xiao displayed her terrifying side in front of Xiaochen. After Xiaochen displayed the sword body, a crescent moon slowly condensed behind Xiao Xiao. The crescent moon was like a pair of wings that appeared behind Xiao Xiao's back. At the same time, along with the appearance of the crescent moon, Xiao Xiao's aura underwent a drastic change. A wave of chilliness gushed out wildly. This wave of chilliness that exuded from Xiao Xiao's body was different from Qin Shuru's ice god physique. This wave of chilliness could even chill one's soul. The shadow of the crescent moon served as a foil for Xiao Xiao. For a moment, Xiao Xiao seemed to have transformed into a moon fairy. Upon seeing this, the old man muttered softly. Lunarine physique, similar to Xiaochen's sword body, the Lunarine physique was also one of the top concentrated physiques in the world. One was a sword body, while the other was a moonine body. The elder's eyes gradually revealed a solemn look. The demonic geniuses of the Great Thousand World were indeed worthy of their reputations. None of them were simple. Every demonic genius possessed shocking strength and trump cards. This was the first time that Xiaochen had seen Xiaochen's special physique. Hence, he was slightly stunned. However, he quickly fixed his gaze on the old man. At the same time, with a thought, a blood sword appeared in Xiaochen's hand. With a slash of his sword, a blood-red sword light fiercely attacked the old man. In the face of Xiao Chen's attack, the old man didn't dodge at all and punched out. However, this time, Xiao Chen's attack was obviously much stronger than before because he had used the sword body. As such, the old man did not gain any advantage in this collision. The old man shattered Xiao Chen's sword with a single punch. However, the old man's attack also gradually dissipated. At the same time, Xiao Xiao appeared on the old man's left side. His right hand slowly streaked across the void. Instantly, a crescent moon attacked the old man, carrying with it a chilling aura. Moonlight slash. Xiao Chen shouted softly. The most terrifying thing about the lunarine physique was not its attack power, but its extreme coldness that could freeze everything. Moreover, the lunarine physique's attack was extremely threatening to the soul. The slightest carelessness could cause serious damage to the soul. This was the reason why everyone was most afraid of the lunarine physique. In the face of Xiao Xiao's moonlight slash, the old man did not choose to take it head-on. Instead, he dodged sideways and narrowly avoided Xiao Xiao's attack. Xiao Xiao's attack did not hit the old man. Instead, it landed heavily on the Mu City, which was not far away. The attack seemed small, but when it landed on the Mu City, a white light suddenly shot up into the sky. Then, under the white light, half of the Mu City was almost destroyed in an instant. Looking at the doomsday-like scene, many warriors of the Yin Ghost clan were stunned. The Mu City had a great city defense array, but even so, it still could not withstand Xiao Xiao's attack. Many warriors stood rooted to the ground in shock. Such an attack was simply beyond their understanding. When the attack landed, the Mu City could be said to have become a purgatory on Earth. Those warriors of the Yin Ghost clan with low cultivation did not even have time to react before they died. Seeing that Xiao Xiao's attack had destroyed half of the Mu City, the old man's eyes flashed with anger. He shouted, You are courting death. Xiao Xiao's attack had killed at least tens of thousands of warriors of the Yin Ghost clan. This naturally made the old man furious. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he stared at Xiao Xiao. At the same time, flames burned fiercely around the old man, causing the surrounding temperature to soar. Seeing so many of his clansmen being killed, the old man was really angry. Although he was not far from death, the old man had deep feelings for the descendants of the Yin Ghost clan. He did not want the Yin Ghost clan to be destroyed. Because of this, the old man did not hesitate to use a secret method to survive until now. Even if I die today, I will protect the Yin Ghost clan, the old man said coldly. The old man coldly shouted as the surrounding temperature rose. At the same time, a huge axe that was burning with flames appeared in his hand. Die! With a furious roar, the old man swung the axe down. In an instant, a flaming attack slashed fiercely toward Xiao Xiao. This attack was definitely the old man's angry attack. In the face of the old man's attack, Xiao Xiao obviously could not withstand it. Although he immediately condensed a moonlight in front of him to block the attack, the moonlight was quickly destroyed by the old man's attack. Just as the old man's attack was about to hit Xiao Xiao, Xiao Chen appeared in front of him and said coldly, You have more than one opponent. As he said that, Xiao Chen protected Xiao Xiao and condensed a sword barrier in front of him. Numerous blood swords protected Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Then, with a loud bang, a huge explosion formed by flames and blood energy exploded in the sky. In the sky, numerous flames fell like raindrops. The terrifying shockwaves of the battle affected many people who were fighting intensely. Those who were unable to dodge in time were instantly killed. With the combined strength of the two of them, they were barely able to block it. This was the terror of an End Realm expert. Although his attack did not succeed, the old man was not discouraged. After all, geniuses like Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were naturally not easy to defeat, much less when the two of them worked together. He did not give Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao much time to breathe. After his attack landed, the old man held the giant axe in his hand. Flames burned around his body as he attacked Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao once again. Facing the old man's attack, Xiao Chen said softly to Xiao Xiao, Senior sister, be careful. As he said that, he held his sword and charged forwards. Numerous blood swords surrounded his body. Instantly, he engaged in an intense battle with the old man. However, facing the old man who attacked with hatred, Xiaochen was obviously at a disadvantage. The gap between the End Realm and the Dao Realm was not so easy to cross. Moreover, the old man did not just break through to the End Realm. His cultivation was not weak at all. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2093. Xiaochen and the old man were locked in an intense battle. Facing the old man who attacked with hatred, Xiaochen was indeed having a tough time. Luckily, he had Xiao Zhao's help. The two of them had indeed reduced Xiaochen's pressure by quite a bit. This was the first time that Xiaochen was in such a life-and-death battle with an End Realm expert. If he wasn't careful, he might die. Xiaochen and Xiao Xiao were locked in an intense battle with the old man. On the other side, Li Chun and Dao Ju were the same. The two of them had already gone all out and were locked in an intense battle with the other old ancestor of the Yin Ghost race. Apart from Xiao Chen's group of 4 and the 2 old ancestors of the Yin Ghost race, the other elders of the Heaven Plan Hall and the martial artists of the Yin Ghost race were also locked in an intense battle. However, compared to the Heaven Plan Hall, the Yin Ghost race was obviously at a disadvantage. Especially after their 2 End Realm old ancestors were locked in battle with Xiao Chen's group of 4, no one from the Yin Ghost race could deal with the elders of the Heaven Plan Hall. This time, the Heaven Plan Hall sent out a total of 10 elders. Although their combat strength might not be as strong as Xiao Chen's group of 4, since they could become elders of the Heaven Plan Hall, their cultivation was at the Dao realm. They were on the same level as the sword head of the sword sect. No one from the Yin Ghost race could stop the 10 Dao realm experts. After all, apart from the 2 hidden End Realm old ancestors, the strongest person in the Yin Ghost race was the race leader, Yin Fei. However, his cultivation was only at the comprehension realm and there was still a huge gap between him and the Dao realm. At this point in the battle, the situation was pretty much one-sided. Many of the Yin Ghost race martial artists were being killed by the people of the Heaven Plan Hall. The difference in strength was indeed huge. The Yin Ghost race didn't have much ability to fight back against the experts of the Heaven Plan Hall. Just as both sides were locked in an intense battle, the 2 old ancestors of the Yin Ghost race who were still unable to break free from Xiao Chen's group of 4 shouted at the same time. "Tiandao, are you still not going to attack?" The 2 of them shouted angrily at the same time. As soon as they finished speaking, a white light suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Then, a middle-aged man appeared on the battlefield. The middle-aged man was the will of the heavenly way from the Wood Realm. He sighed and said softly, "This is a grudge from many years ago. Why do you have to be so ruthless? The Yin Ghost race is no longer a threat to your heavenly policy palace. Why do you have to be so aggressive?" The appearance of the will of the heavenly way caused everyone to unconsciously stop what they were doing. No one had expected that the will of the heavenly way of the Wood Realm would actually appear to help the Dark Ghost clan, and at such a crucial time. Faced with the sudden appearance of the will of the heavenly way, Li Chun said, "The grudges of the past have nothing to do with me. I was just following orders." Li Chun had not personally experienced the grudges between the Yin Ghost race and the Heavenly Policy Palace, as well as that great battle. He was not even born at that time. Therefore, Li Chun did not care about being so aggressive. Everything he did today was just following orders. Everything was just because of Li Zhao's orders. Li Chun was just following orders. Hearing Li Chun's words, the 2 old ancestors of the Yin Ghost race sneered and said, "Ha, Li Xiao, what a great Li Xiao. Is it really because of that battle that you want to destroy our Yin Ghost race?" The reason why the Heavenly Policy Palace was so eager to destroy the Yin Ghost race had always been because of that battle, but was that really the truth? Li Chun, Xiaochen, Xiao Xiao, and the Dao Ju, or rather, everyone present did not know what happened back then. Even if they knew, it was just hearsay. Therefore, no one knew what happened between the Yin Ghost race and the Heavenly Policy Palace back then, and why the Heavenly Policy Palace wanted to destroy the Yin Ghost race. However, the two old ancestors of the Yin ghost race knew what happened back then because they had personally experienced it. Li Chun had a cold smile on his face, but he did not say anything. Instead, the will of the heavenly way from the wood world said in a deep voice, "Everyone from the heavenly policy palace, it has been so long since that incident back then. No matter how great the grudges are, it should have dissipated. Why don't both sides stop now?" The appearance of the will of the heavenly way from the wood world caused both sides to temporarily stop fighting. At the same time, in the heavenly policy palace of the Great Thousand World, Jun Wuya and Li Xiao were sitting opposite each other in Li Zhao's cave. As for Luo Xing, he was not present. There was a jar of wine in front of each of them. Jun Wuya took a sip and then looked at Li Xiao in front of him and said, "Why do you want to destroy the Yin ghost race?" "Because of the battle back then." Hearing this, Li Xiao also took a sip of wine and said unhurriedly. In response to Li Zhao's answer, Jun Wuya smiled noncommittally and said, "Is that so? The battle back then has already passed. If it was only because of that, with your character, you would never be so aggressive." Jun Wuya and Li Xiao had known each other since they were young, so he knew Li Zhao's character very well. If it was only because of the battle back then, Li Xiao would never be so aggressive and vowed to destroy the Yin ghost race. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Li Xiao fell into silence. He had no intention of replying. He drank his wine alone and fell into silence as well. Looking at the silent Li Xiao, Jun Wuya's face turned serious and said, "What exactly happened back then?" "The battle between the Heavenly Policy Hall and the Yin ghost race erupted too strangely. Also, what is your relationship with Yin Lydian? In addition, yesterday you used your soul doppelganger. You should have gone to the wood world, right?" Jun Wuya asked 3 questions in a row. In response to Jun Wuya's questions, Li Zhao's expression became more and more complicated. A trace of reminiscence and hatred flashed through his eyes. After taking a big gulp of wine, Li Xiao finally said something that could be said to be within Jun Wuya's expectations, but it was also extremely shocking. Li Zhao's eyes were filled with reminiscence as he said indifferently, "Back then, you and Luo Xing entered your own sect or master because of your identity. As for me, because I had no relatives or friends, I couldn't enter those powerful sects at all. In the end, after many twists and turns, I became the disciple of Emperor Mingfeng. When I became the disciple of Master already had a disciple. He was Yin Lydian. He and I were actually martial brothers. Yin Lydian was the ancestor of the Yin ghost race and the emperor of the Yin ghost race back then." Jun Wuya didn't expect Li Xiao and Yin Lydian to be martial brothers. This was something that Jun Wuya didn't know. After being stunned for a moment, Jun Wuya came back to his senses and said, "I see, this makes sense. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 2094. Li Xiao and Yin Lydian were actually fellow disciples. Upon hearing this, Jun Wuya revealed a look of realization. Li Xiao and Yin Lydian were actually fellow disciples. Upon hearing this, Jun Wuya revealed a look of realization. Jun Wuya did not know much about the incident between the Dark Ghost Clan and the Heavenly Policy Mansion. Moreover, Jun Wuya did not intervene at that time. However, Jun Wuya always felt that it was a coincidence. The reason was the relationship between Li Xiao and Yin Lydian. Before the war broke out between the two sides, Yin Lydian and Li Xiao's relationship could be said to be very close. Although no one knew that the two were actually brothers, Yin Lydian would often come to the Heavenly Policy Mansion at that time, and Li Xiao would also often go to the Yin Ghost Clan. Before the war broke out, Yin Lydian and Li Xiao were considered to be very close friends in the eyes of outsiders. However, it could be said that a war broke out between these two people without any warning. At that time, it was widely rumored that the Dark Ghost Clan attacked the Heavenly Policy Mansion because they wanted to become one of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. However, in Jun Wuya's opinion, such a rumor was actually unfounded. This was because Yin Lydian had no reason to target the Heavenly Policy Mansion. Putting aside their previous relationship, the Heavenly Policy Mansion's strength at that time was already not weak. Since Lydian wanted to lead the Dark Ghost clan to become one of the 10 great Ling Tian sects, why would he target the powerful Heavenly Policy Mansion? Wouldn't it be better to choose the weakest Ling Tian sect? The matter was very strange. Today, Li Xiao took the initiative to reveal his relationship with Lydian. Jun Wuya figured everything out. The reason for the war was obviously not as simple as the rumors said. It was definitely not because of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. Just as Jun Wuya had guessed, Li Xiao soon gave the answer. After taking a sip of wine, Li Xiao said indifferently. Back then, Li Tian and I were cultivating under Honored Master's tutelage. Although I became Honored Master's tutelage later than Li Tian, my talent was much higher than Li Tian's, so I quickly caught up with him in terms of cultivation. In the end, I took the final step before him and broke through to the Emperor realm. After I broke through to the Emperor realm, Honored Master allowed me to complete my apprenticeship. After that, I founded the Heavenly Policy Palace. Many years later, I broke through to the Emperor realm and returned to the Ghost clan. In the beginning, because we were fellow disciples, I was very close to Lydian. However, one day, that bastard actually killed Master for a precious treasure. That was how the great battle began. Li Xiao revealed the truth. Back then, the great battle between the Heavenly Policy Mansion and the Nether Ghost clan was not because they were fighting for the position of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. To put it bluntly, it was not the Nether Ghost clan who made the first move. It was the Heavenly Policy Mansion who made the first move because Li Xiao wanted to avenge his master, Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng. Upon hearing Li Xiao's words, Jun Wuya's face revealed a look of shock as he asked in astonishment, "Precious treasure? You're not talking about Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng's upper river diagram, are you?" Jun Wuya had never seen Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng before, but he had heard of him. In terms of seniority, Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng was older than Jun Wuya and Li Xiao. Moreover, Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng was a rogue cultivator who did not pass down his strength to any sect. All along, Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng had been elusive. Therefore, Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng was definitely the most mysterious Supreme Ancestor in the world. What everyone knew about Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng the most was his precious treasure, or rather, a divine artifact, which was the mountain and river diagram. It was said that the mountain and river diagram was personally refined by Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng. Moreover, Supreme Ancestor Ming Feng had nourished it with his own blood essence all year round. Its power was extremely terrifying. Jun Wuya immediately guessed that it was the mountain and river diagram. Hearing this, Li Xiao did not deny it and nodded slightly. That's right, it's really the mountain and river diagram. It was for the mountain and river diagram that Lydian killed his master with his own hands. One could imagine how intense Li Xiao's hatred was when he learned that his master had been killed by Lydian. That was why Li Xiao had been relentlessly attacking the Ghost clan for so many years, as if he was determined to exterminate the Ghost clan. Of course, other than the hatred in his heart, Li Xiao was so relentless because he had not found the whereabouts of the mountain and river diagrams so far. Back then, after I led the Heavenly Policy Mansion to defeat Lydian and the Ghost Tribe fled to the Wood World. Lydian also sacrificed his life to destroy the space passage between the Great Thousand World and the Wood World. However, the mountain and river diagram disappeared. I searched the entire Ghost Tribe but could not find the whereabouts of the mountain and river diagram. Subsequently, I have been searching for the mountain and river diagram for so many years, but to no avail. Therefore, I am certain that the mountain and river diagram must have been brought to the Wood World by the Ghost Tribe. Li Xiao was certain that the mountain and river diagram must have been brought to the Wood World by the Ghost Tribe. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Li Xiao not to have any news about it after so many years. Li Xiao's real goal was to find the mountain and river diagram. Therefore, Li Xiao sent people to the Wood World this time and did not hesitate to use his spiritual avatar to enter the Wood World through the space-time passage. Because the space-time passage between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World was not stable, Li Xiao's real body was definitely unable to enter the Wood World. However, it was different for his spiritual avatar. As long as Li Xiao controlled the strength of his spiritual avatar and made it so that its cultivation did not exceed the Dao realm, he could enter the wood world through the space-time passage. Li Xiao had to find the mountain and river diagram because it was his master's and the most precious thing. After hearing Li Xiao's words, Jun Huiya fell into deep thought. Neither of them were convinced. However, after a while, Jun Huiya seemed to have suddenly realized something and his expression changed drastically. Oh no, those little guys are in danger. At this moment, Jun Huiya's expression was extremely ugly. Hearing this, Li Xiao looked at Jun Huiya in confusion and asked with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? Why was Jun Huiya suddenly so nervous? Li Xiao didn't know how to react for a moment. But soon, following Jun Huiya's words, Li Xiao's expression changed greatly. Back then, are you sure that Lydian had died? You saw his corpse with your own eyes? As soon as Jun Huiya said this, Li Xiao's expression instantly turned ugly. After carefully recalling what happened back then, Li Xiao said with a shocked expression. You mean Lydian didn't die? That's the only explanation. Otherwise, after so many years, if Lydian really died, how could you not have any news about the mountain and river diagram? No one who obtained such a treasure would be able to keep it a secret. Unless Lydian didn't die in the first place and the mountain and river diagram has always been with him. Facing Li Xiao's shock, Jun Huiya said in a grave tone. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2095. Back then, Lydian had died because he had sacrificed his own life to destroy the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World. However, now that Li Xiao thought about it, he realized that he had never seen Lydian's corpse because everyone had said that Lydian's corpse had been destroyed. Back then, Lydian had died because he had sacrificed his own life to destroy the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World. However, now that Li Xiao thought about it, he realized that he had never seen Lydian's corpse because everyone had said that Lydian's corpse had been destroyed. Lydian was probably still alive. Hearing this, Li Xiao's expression turned even colder. If that was really the case, then hadn't he been fooled by Lydian all these years? Moreover, if what Jun Huiya said was true, then Xiaochen, Xiao Xiao, Dao Ju, Li Chun, and the others who were in the Wood World were in great danger. After all, an emperor was definitely not someone they could fight against. How can you be sure that Lydian is still alive? If the mountain and river diagram has always been in the Wood World, then it's not strange that I haven't heard any news about it all these years. Li Xiao looked at Jun Huiya and asked in a deep voice. Li Xiao didn't want to believe that Lydian was still alive, but Jun Huiya's analysis made him unable to refute it. Jun Huiya said indifferently, You're right. However, back then, Lydian killed Emperor Ming Feng for the mountain and river diagram. The mountain and river diagram is a supreme treasure, so even if Lydian obtained it, he wouldn't be able to use it in a short period of time. Do you think Lydian didn't think of a way out after spending so much effort? Isn't it strange that he died so easily? Are you saying that Lydian had planned to feign death from the beginning? Li Xiao asked in a deep voice. Jun Huiya nodded in response. I'm afraid so. Otherwise, how can we explain all this? Lydian had planned to feign death from the beginning. In response to Jun Huiya's conjecture, Li Xiao fell silent for a long time. In the end, he still couldn't believe it. If that's the case, how did he destroy the Wood World and the Great Thousand World? How is that possible? Originally, Li Xiao wanted to ask how Lydian had destroyed the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World, but halfway through his sentence, Li Xiao thought of something and exclaimed in disbelief. Clearly, Li Xiao had thought of another way to destroy the space-time passageway that connected the two realms, and that was to have the will of the heavenly Tao of the Wood Realm take action. In this way, Lydian wouldn't have to do anything. However, would the will of the heavenly Tao of the Wood World be willing to destroy the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand Worlds? Why would the will heavenly world? Things had completely exceeded Li Zhao's expectations. Looking at the shocked Li Xiao, Junwuya said indifferently, "Tell those little guys to come back. This matter is no longer something they can handle." Li Zhao's soul avatar had already rushed to the wood world, but if Lydian was still alive, it obviously wouldn't be of much help. For safety reasons, Junwuya also asked Li Xiao to inform Xiao Chen and the others to return to the Great Thousand World immediately. As for the wood world, he would leave it to them to deal with it personally. After hearing Junwuya's words, Li Xiao didn't dare to be careless. He immediately nodded and agreed to Junwuya's suggestion. Just as the two of them decided to let Xiao Chen and the others leave the wood world and return to the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen and the others outside Mu City stopped fighting because of the appearance of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world. The will of the heavenly way of the wood world wasn't very strong, but it still had the cultivation of the end realm. At this time, the appearance of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world surprised Xiao Chen, Li Chun, and the others. After hearing that the will of the heavenly way of the wood world wanted Xiao Chen and the others to stop, Li Chun clearly chose to refuse. In response, the will of the heavenly way of the wood world only said indifferently, "You can't destroy the Yin Ghost race. Even if I don't do anything, you won't succeed. All of you might even die here. The Yin Ghost race couldn't be destroyed?" After hearing the will of the heavenly way of the wood world, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. He instinctively felt that something was wrong. Because from the current situation, the Yin Ghost race didn't have much power to resist at all. If it wasn't for the appearance of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world, the Yin Ghost race would have suffered heavy casualties. However, the will of the heavenly way of the wood world said that the Yin Ghost race couldn't be destroyed. Even if he didn't do anything, the result would be the same. This obviously didn't conform to the truth, unless the Yin Ghost race had some hidden strength. For some reason, Xiao Chen suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. Xiao Chen had such a feeling before, and every time it appeared, it meant that a great danger was about to descend. Xiao Chen had always believed in his intuition, and this time was no exception. However, before Xiao Chen could figure out the situation, a deep and terrifying black beam of light shot up into the sky from the bottom of Mu City. In an instant, the entire Mu City was enveloped by the black beam of light. The warriors, the buildings, and everything else in Mu City seemed to have been obliterated. The black light beam had obliterated everything in an instant. Looking at the black beam of light in front of them, Xiao Chen and the others whispered in disbelief. How is this possible? Xiao Chen and the others felt an extremely terrifying aura from the aura of the black beam of light. Such an aura was obviously not something that an End Realm expert could possess. In other words, there was an Emperor Realm expert hiding in Mu City. Everyone was shocked by the black beam of light. However, the warriors of the Yin Ghost race looked at the black beam of light with anger. Many of them even shouted angrily. This was because the entire Mu City had been obliterated by the black beam of light. The warriors of the Yin Ghost race who were still in Mu City had also been wiped out. Seeing their relatives and friends killed by the black beam of light, the warriors of the Yin Ghost race were furious. This was because the number of people killed by the black beam of light was much more than that of Xiao Chen and the others. Even the will of the heavenly way of the wood world's face darkened. Obviously, he didn't expect that the person behind the black beam of light wouldn't even let the people of the Yin Ghost race go. Looking at the black beam of light, the will of the heavenly way of the wood world said coldly, "Yin Lydian, are you crazy? You won't even let your own people go? Yin Lydian?" Hearing the words of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world, countless people of the Yin Ghost race, Li Chun, and several elders of the heavenly policy mansion were stunned. Wasn't this a person who should have been dead for countless years? At first, the crowd didn't react to the words of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world. But soon, a hoarse voice came from the black beam of light. It was filled with endless coldness and mockery. "I'm really sorry. I've been in seclusion for too long. I couldn't control my strength properly." Chapter 2096. The voice was filled with mockery. Hearing this, the will of the heavenly way frowned slightly. Then, along with the voice, the crowd gradually saw two figures slowly appear in front of them as the black light gradually disappeared. The voice was filled with mockery. Hearing this, the will of the heavenly way frowned slightly. Then, along with the voice, the crowd gradually saw two figures slowly appear in front of them as the black light gradually disappeared. About 10 minutes later, the black light completely disappeared, and the two figures clearly appeared in front of everyone. One was old and one was young, a middle-aged man and a young man. The young man looked about the same age as Xiao Chen and the others. However, at this moment, everyone's eyes fell on the middle-aged man beside the young man. This middle-aged man was none other than the old ancestor of the Yin Ghost race, Yin Litian. Not to mention the Yin Ghost race, even the sect masters and sect masters of the various factions of the Wood World recognized the middle-aged man at a glance. The middle-aged man's appearance was exactly the same as the huge statue in Mu City. There was no difference at all. Every year, the Yin Ghost race would hold a memorial ceremony for Yin Litian. However, at this moment, Yin Litian actually appeared in front of everyone. He wore a loose black robe and had a playful smile on his face. Yin Litian didn't care about the crowd's gaze at all. He only shouted coldly when he saw the will of the heavenly way. Yin Litian, you're crazy. You won't even let off someone from your own race. Yin Litian didn't die, which shocked everyone. Even the two End Realm old ancestors of the Yin Ghost race were stunned on the spot. Looking at them, it was obvious that they didn't know about this matter. In other words, probably only the Wood World will of the heavenly way didn't know that Yin Litian was fine. Everything was almost exactly as Junwia had guessed. In the face of the will of the heavenly way, Yin Litian smiled coldly and said, all right, didn't I already say that I was in seclusion for a long time and didn't control my strength properly? That's all. Yin Litian's appearance had destroyed the entire Mu City. Naturally, the people who were in the Mu City had disappeared along with him. Almost all of them were from the Yin Ghost clan. It could be said that because of the appearance of Lunar Day, almost all the members of the Yin Ghost clan had been killed. Except for the experts of the Yin Ghost clan who had gone out of the city to fight Xiao Chen, the rest of the old, weak, women, and children were basically all dead. Yin Litian, the main culprit, didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. It was as if he had just stepped on a group of ants. In the eyes of the Yin Ghost clan, Yin Litian was the god of the Yin Ghost clan. However, in his eyes, the Yin Ghost clan and his clansmen were as lowly as ants. Seeing Yin Litian's indifferent attitude, the will of the heavenly way frowned. For a moment, he realized that he didn't recognize Yin Litian anymore. After Yin Litian's reply, the two End Realm old ancestors looked at Yin Litian and said excitedly, "Clan leader, you're not dead." The two of them were from the same era as Yin Litian and used to follow him. Now that they saw that Yin Litian was still alive, it was easy to imagine how they felt. Upon hearing their words, Yin Litian turned to look at them. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he said, "Oh, it's the two of you. It seems that the two of you have used a secret technique to survive until now. How thoughtful of you." It sounded like a compliment, but there was a hint of something unusual in his words. However, perhaps because they were too excited to see Yin Litian, they didn't realize the problem when they heard Yin Litian's words. They continued to speak excitedly. "The clan leader is still alive. The heavens are really protecting our Yin Ghost clan. There is hope for our Yin Ghost clan." The two of them were excited because of Yin Litian's appearance. However, Yin Litian's smile became even more playful. "I already know of your loyalty to the Yin Ghost clan. Since that's the case, I won't reject your good intentions." As he spoke, Yin Litian extended his right hand. In an instant, a dense black aura gushed out and enveloped the two of them. Then, the two of them cried out in pain. Everyone could clearly see that the two of them, who were enveloped by the black aura, began to dissipate rapidly. It was as though they were being refined. "Ah! Clan leader, why?" The two of them screamed in pain. Yin Litian didn't stop. He just said indifferently, "You only have 2 months left. In any case, the two of you only have less than a month to live. Why don't you give me your cultivation before you die?" I've been in seclusion for so long that I'm also very weak. Lydian refined the two End Realm old ancestors. Looking at the scenes in front of them, all the Ghost race cultivators present were stunned. Lydian was the god in their hearts. However, the martialists of the Dark Ghost tribe realized that the god in their hearts was different from what they had imagined. Lydian seemed to have no feelings for his fellow clansmen. He killed them as he pleased, as though the Ghost clan wasn't even worth mentioning in his eyes. The god in their hearts was completely different from what they had imagined. In response, the will of the Heavenly Way couldn't help but roar in anger. Lydian, you're crazy. They're members of your Ghost clan. They used a secret technique to survive until now for the sake of the Ghost clan. If it weren't for the two of them, the Ghost clan would have been wiped out a long time ago. The Wood Realm's will of the Great Path was indeed a little angry. The appearance of Lydian this time gave people the feeling that it was a completely different person. In the face of the will of the Heavenly Way's rebuke, Lydian looked at the will of the Heavenly Way again after refining the two End Realm ancestors. However, Lydian did something that no one expected. Lydian looked at the Wood World's will of the Heavenly Way with a cold glint in his eyes. His voice gradually turned cold, chirping non-stop. Do you really think you're that big of a deal? I don't need you to tell me what to do. Before the will of the Heavenly Way could reply, Lydian pointed with his finger. Then, a black light flashed and struck the will of the Heavenly Way. The will of the Heavenly Tao's expression flickered, and it stared at Lydian in disbelief. Lydian, you. It pointed a finger at Lydian and spat, Lydian, you. What about me? Useless thing. I don't need you anymore. Go to hell. Lydian didn't give the will of the Heavenly Way a chance to speak and interrupted in a deep voice. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2097. The Wood Realm's will of the Great Path didn't even get to utter a single word before it was annihilated by Lydian. Following the death of the will of the Heavenly Way, a rain of blood began to fall from the sky. At the same time, a series of sobbing sounds could be heard. With the death of the will of the Heavenly Way, the heavens and earth were crying. From today onwards, the Wood World would probably not have the will of the Heavenly Way for a very long time. Without the will of the Heavenly Way, the Wood World's laws of heaven and earth would probably be missing. However, Lydian clearly didn't care about all of this. Seeing Lydian kill the will of the Heavenly Way with their own eyes, everyone present was completely shocked. At this moment, Xiaochen quietly approached Xiao Xiao and used his spiritual energy to transmit a message: be careful. Find a chance to escape. Xiaochen wasn't familiar with Lydian at all. However, judging from how Lydian refined the two End Realm experts of the Ghost race and killed the will of the Heavenly Way with a single finger, Lydian's cultivation was definitely at the Emperor Realm. Facing an Emperor Realm expert, Xiaochen didn't have the slightest intention of fighting because it was simply impossible. Not to mention that Xiaochen was only at the Dao Realm. Even if Xiaochen was at the End Realm, he probably wouldn't be a match for Lydian. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Xiao Xiao also nodded. Indeed, facing an Emperor Realm expert, it was impossible to fight. Even if they could escape, it would depend on luck. Xiaochen and Xiao Xiao were already prepared to escape. On the other side, Dao Ju and Li Chun were also prepared. However, Dao Ju said to Li Chun with some dissatisfaction. Li Chun, is your Heavenly Policy Palace crazy? Lydian is fine, but you actually sent us to the Wood World to die. Lydian wasn't dead, and there was a living Emperor Realm expert in the Wood World. Under such circumstances, the Heavenly Policy Palace actually sent them to the Wood World to destroy the Ghost race. Wasn't this crazy? Hearing Dao Ju's words, Li Chun felt helpless. He also didn't know that Lydian wasn't dead. Otherwise, the Heavenly Policy Palace definitely wouldn't be so rash. Moreover, if the Heavenly Policy Palace really knew that Lydian wasn't dead, Li Xiao would definitely personally take action. Then, they wouldn't leave it to the juniors like them. The Heavenly Policy Palace. In Li Tian's eyes on Heavenly Policy Palace. In Li Tian's gaze, Li Tian's gaze towards Li Chun, Li Xiao, Li Tian's, and Li Tian's Policy Palace. Of Li Tian's heavenly policy look. Li Tian's look. Look Li Tian of course, Li Tian of, be it. Do you think you can destroy the Yin ghost race in front of me today? Yin Li Tian sneered. However, it seemed like he didn't care about the Yin ghost race at all. Otherwise, Yin Li Tian wouldn't have personally destroyed the Mu city and killed so many of the Yin ghost race's clansmen. Xiao Chen and the other three didn't reply to Yin Li Tian's words. In front of an Emperor realm expert, the four of them were like fish on a chopping board. At this moment, Xiao Chen and the other three were only thinking about how to escape. Just as Xiao Chen and the other three were silent, a voice suddenly came from afar. Then, Li Zhao's figure appeared in front of everyone. Yin Li Tian, you really didn't die. Li Zhao's appearance stunned Yin Li Tian, Xiao Chen and the others. But soon, Yin Li Tian smiled and said, Soul doppelganger? My good junior brother, you can't be thinking of defeating me with just a soul doppelganger, right? Yin Li Tian was taken aback by Li Zhao's appearance at the beginning. This was because Li Xiao couldn't possibly appear in the wood world. The space-time passage hadn't been completely stabilized, so it was impossible for Li Xiao to come to the wood world from the Great Thousand World. Yin Li Tian was shocked at first, but soon, he realized that Li Xiao was just a soul doppelganger. There was nothing to be afraid of. Moreover, Yin Li Tian was no longer the same as before. He had been in seclusion for so many years in order to completely refine the mountain and river diagram. For this, Yin Li Tian was willing to pay any price. Now that the mountain and river diagram had been completely refined by Yin Li Tian, to put it bluntly, even if the person standing in front of him was Li Zhao's true body, Yin Li Tian would not be afraid at all. Hearing Yin Li Tian's words, Li Xiao shouted coldly, Yin Li Tian, you've done so much for the sake of a mountain and river painting. You're even willing to use your own clansmen. It seems that you're truly beyond saving. Yin Li Tian didn't deny that everything was for the sake of the mountain and river diagram. Indeed, Yin Li Tian was willing to use his own people for the sake of the mountain and river diagram. He didn't even hesitate to destroy the Yin Ghost tribe. Back then, Yin Li Tian had almost destroyed the Yin Ghost tribe. Then, he faked his death and joined forces with the will of the heavenly way from the wood world to buy himself enough time to refine the mountain and river diagram. From this, it could be seen that Yin Li Tian didn't care about the Yin Ghost tribe at all. Upon hearing Li Zhao's words, none of the Yin Ghost tribe cultivators stood up to refute him. This was because they realized that the deity in their hearts was indeed different from what they had imagined. There was a huge gap between them and the deity in their minds. This wasn't difficult to see from Yin Li Tian's previous actions. Yin Li Tian admitted it frankly. He looked at Li Xiao with a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, My people? Li Xiao, it seems like you didn't remember a single word I said before. Is it important for a cultivator to talk about tribesmen, friends, family, and brothers? You are wrong. You are gravely mistaken. In the world of cultivators, strength is everything. As long as you have strength, what else does it matter? I used my own people for the sake of the mountain and river diagram. I killed my master, but so what? Now that I'm strong enough to face anything on my own, why would I need my clansmen? Speaking of this, Yin Li Tian glanced at the Yin Ghost tribe cultivators disdainfully. Then, the smile on his face became even more contemptuous. Moreover, what use do I have for my people who are like ants? What use do they have other than adding to my troubles? Since you are all ants, there is no meaning in living in this world. Rather than dying in the hands of others, why don't I personally end all of you? From now on, the Dark Ghost tribe will no longer exist in this world. As he spoke, clouds of black mist began to spread out from Yin Li Tian's body. Xiao Chen immediately pulled Xiao Xiao back when he saw what was happening. He didn't dare to come into contact with the black mist, as Xiao Chen could sense extreme danger from it. Please add it to your collection, monthly vote, recommend it. End of chapter. Chapter 2098. Who would have thought that Lydian would attack his own clansmen? Moreover, he even declared that there would be no more Ghost clan in the future. After all, Lydian himself was a member of the Ghost clan. Who would have thought that Lydian would attack his own clansmen? Moreover, he even declared that there would be no more Ghost clan in the future. After all, Lydian himself was a member of the Ghost clan. It could be seen that in Lydian's heart, strength was the most important thing. He could give up everything else as long as he had strength. His clansmen, family, and friends were not worth mentioning. Seeing that Lydian had attacked, Xiaochen pulled Xiao and retreated immediately. However, most of the other people, including the Ghost clan and the cultivators who came to participate in the Heavenly Policy Mansion's assessment, were shrouded by the black fog. In an instant, miserable screams continuously sounded. The bodies of those who were enveloped by the black fog began to fester and dissipate. They were forcefully killed. Lydian's main target was the master of the Ghost clan. Until now, the cultivators of the Ghost clan had never thought that the day would come when the Ghost clan would not be annihilated by others, but by Lydian, who they had always regarded as a god. How ridiculous was it that they were killed by the person they had always regarded as a god? For so many years, the Ghost clan had always regarded Lydian as the symbol of the Ghost clan. He was their hero, their god. But in the end, they were killed by him. Li Xiao said coldly as he watched Lydian slaughter the Ghost clan's clansmen. "You're really a madman." In Li Xiao's opinion, Lydian was indeed crazy. Moreover, he was the kind that couldn't be cured. He was completely blinded by his strength. He was an incorrigible and deranged person. For the sake of strength, he would do anything. Hearing Li Xiao's words, Lydian sneered and said, "Madman? Ha, junior brother, if I can obtain supreme strength, so what if I become a madman? Strength is everything. In the world of cultivators, strength is the only way to survive. Without strength, you will forever be a fish on the chopping block of others. This is the price of not having strength." Lydian did not feel that he had done anything wrong. Li Xiao could not be bothered to say anything about it. He knew that it was pointless to say anything to a person like Lydian. They could only watch helplessly as the martial artists of the Ghost tribe were killed. Of course, many other people were affected as well. There were even 2 Dao Realm elders of the Heavenly Policy Mansion who were killed on the spot. Just as Lydian had said, from today onwards, the Ghost clan would no longer exist in this world. If there was one, it would be Lydian himself. However, Lydian did not admit that he was a member of the Ghost clan. In other words, Lydian did not care about this at all. All he wanted was unparalleled strength. Black mist filled the surroundings, and corpses fell from the sky one after another. The scene was simply like Azura hell. After personally annihilating the Ghost tribe, Lydian locked his gaze on Xiaochen and the other 3. He then looked at Li Xiao and sneered. "Li Xiao, do you think you can save these 4 little fellows in front of me? If you want them, come to the wood world and look for me personally. I will give you 1 month. If you don't come, the 4 of them can only die." Lydian had no intention of letting Xiaochen and the other 3 go. Li Xiao's face darkened when he heard Lydian's words. He was only a spirit avatar. It was naturally impossible for him to stop Lydian. Without any hesitation, Li Xiao shouted, "Run! Hide! Wait for me to come." It was naturally impossible to stop Lydian with just a spirit avatar. Therefore, Li Xiao only gave one order to Xiaochen and the other 3. It was to run and hide until Li Xiao's main body arrived. Upon hearing Li Xiao's words, it could be said that Xiaochen had already taken Xiao and fled before Li Xiao could say anything. From the very beginning, Xiaochen knew that Li Xiao's avatar alone wouldn't be able to stop Lydian. Therefore, when Xiaochen sensed that Lydian was about to attack the 4 of them, he immediately fled with Xiao. Lydian sneered when he heard Li Xiao's words. "Do you think you can escape?" As he spoke, Lydian slowly extended his right hand and made a grabbing motion. Immediately, the surrounding space was sealed, and Dao Ju and Li Chun were trapped. Fortunately, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao managed to escape Yin Li Tian's seal at the last moment. Then, without caring about anything else, the two of them disappeared into the void in a flash. A hint of coldness flashed in Yin Li Tian's eyes when he saw that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao had successfully escaped. He snorted coldly and said, "You won't be able to escape from me." Yin Li Tian wanted to capture Dao Ju, Li Chun, Xiao Chen, and Xiao Xiao because they were his bargaining chips against Li Xiao in the future. The lives of these four monstrous geniuses should be enough to make Li Xiao wary. Moreover, these four monstrous geniuses were not all from the Heavenly Policy Mansion. Therefore, Li Xiao could not act rashly. Otherwise, he would not be able to answer to the forces behind them. For example, the Saber sect behind Dao Ju, the Moon Palace behind Xiao Xiao, and the Sword sect behind Xiao Chen. If the three of them died, how was Li Xiao going to answer to Dao Xiong, Jun Wuya, and Luo Xing? Yin Li Tian did not think that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao would be able to escape from him. Seeing this, Li Xiao shouted angrily, "Yin Li Tian, if you dare to touch a single hair on their heads, I'll tear you into 1,000 pieces." Truth be told, Li Xiao was also panicking. After all, Xiao Chen and the other three were all extraordinary people. If something were to happen to them, the entire Great Thousand World would be thrown into chaos. Moreover, Li Xiao would also be blamed. After all, it was his idea to go to the Wood Realm to destroy the Dark Ghost race. Li Xiao would not allow anything to happen to Xiao Chen and the other three. However, Yin Li Tian sneered when he heard Li Xiao's words. Tear them into 1,000 pieces? Ha, you can say that when your real body arrives. Don't worry, I'll spare their lives for now. I'll give you a month. If you don't show up in a month, you can just wait to collect their corpses. Yin Li Tian waved his hand as he spoke. A ray of black light shot out and hit Li Xiao's spiritual avatar. Li Xiao couldn't withstand Yin Li Tian's attack with just his spirit avatar. Li Xiao's spirit avatar slowly dissipated after it was struck. However, Li Xiao still managed to shout at the last moment, "Let's go! Yin Li Tian, if you dare to touch a single hair on their heads, I won't let you off. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." End of chapter. Chapter 2099. Li Xiao's spirit avatar was destroyed by Yin Li Tian in a single blow, but Yin Li Tian didn't care about Li Xiao's threat. Li Xiao's spirit avatar was destroyed by Yin Li Tian in a single blow, but Yin Li Tian didn't care about Li Xiao's threat. After Li Xiao's spirit avatar slowly dissipated, Yin Li Tian looked at Dao Ju and Li Chun, who didn't manage to escape in time, and said indifferently, "Come with me for the time being." Dao Ju and Li Chun followed Yin Li Tian. At the same time, in Li Xiao's cave dwelling in the Great Thousand Worlds Heavenly Policy Mansion, Li Xiao's eyes were cold. Through his spirit avatar, he naturally knew what happened in the Wood World. Yin Li Tian really didn't die. At this moment, Jun Wuya and Luo Xing both felt the change in Li Xiao. The two of them didn't say anything, but they already knew what had happened. After all, Jun Wuya had already guessed that Yin Li Tian was probably still alive. Now, it seemed that this was indeed the case. Damn Yin Li Tian, he actually faked his death. Li Xiao shouted coldly in front of Jun Wuya and Luo Xing. Yin Li Tian really didn't die. Luo Xing asked, "What's the situation in the Wood World?" "I think everyone in the Heavenly Policy Mansion is dead. Yin Li Tian personally destroyed the Yin Ghost clan. Li Chun and Dao Ju were captured alive, and Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao escaped." Li Xiao didn't hide anything from Luo Xing and truthfully told him what happened in the Wood World. Yin Li Tian's sudden appearance meant that the people in the Heavenly Policy Mansion and those who participated in the assessment were probably doomed. Although Li Xiao was heartbroken about this, he couldn't care less about it now. What he was really worried about was Xiao Chen and the other three. The four of them didn't have simple identities. When he heard that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were in danger, Luo Xing's face quickly darkened. He looked at Li Xiao with displeasure and said, "What do we do now? Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao couldn't be harmed." Therefore, Li Xiao could only comfort Luo Xing they shouldn't be in any danger for the time being. Even if they were captured, Litian will spare their lives. However, we have to think of a way to open the space-time passage and go to the wood world as soon as possible. Litian gave him a month's time. Li Xiao didn't doubt this. Moreover, Li Xiao also knew that Litian wouldn't kill Xiao Chen and the other three because sparing their lives was more useful than killing them. With Xiao Chen and the other three in his hands, Litian would be able to keep Li Xiao in check and make Li Xiao feel apprehensive. Luo Xing wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Jun Wuya. That's enough. It's meaningless to say anything now. The most important thing is to open the space-time passage and go to the wood world as soon as possible. Also, we should inform Dao Xiong. After all, Dao Ju is his only son. If anything happens to him, with that stubborn old man's personality, he'll probably come after you. Now that Saber Ju and Li Chun had been captured alive by Litian, such a big matter naturally had to be told to Saber Xiong as soon as possible. Otherwise, if anything were to happen to Saber Ju, then it would be even harder for Li Xiao to explain himself. Li Xiao immediately revealed a bitter smile when he heard Jun Wuya mention Dao Xiong. That stubborn old man. Li Xiao felt a headache whenever he thought of him. However, there was nothing he could do. Since things had already developed to this point, this was the only way. Li Xiao immediately told Dao Xiong everything that had happened in the wood dimension through a voice transmission talisman in front of Jun Wuya and Luo Xing. Within the Saber sect, it was still the same barren mountain peak that was devoid of life. However, at this moment, a terrifying bloody aura spread out from the mountain peak. The bloody aura was so dense that it instantly attracted the attention of everyone in the Saber sect. From the Vice sect master to the ordinary disciples, everyone's gaze was fixed on the barren mountain peak. The sect master is angry. What happened? The two Vice sect masters were together at this moment. One of them looked at the barren mountain peak with a puzzled gaze and asked curiously. The other person beside him was also confused when he heard this. He shook his head and said, "Nothing has happened recently." The two Vice sect masters knew that the bloody aura was so dense that Dao Xiong was clearly angry. Moreover, he was seething with anger. However, nothing major had happened in the Saber sect recently. It should not have caused Dao Xiong to be so angry. The two of them knew why Dao Xiong was angry. However, the bloody aura that soared into the sky disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. After a short while, the bloody aura quickly dispersed. At this moment, when the two Vice sect masters arrived at the barren mountain peak, Dao Xiong's figure had already disappeared. Dao Xiong had directly left. Needless to say, Dao Xiong's destination when he left the Saber sect was naturally the Heavenly Policy Hall. After a short few hours, an angry roar came from above the Heavenly Policy Mansion. A middle-aged man shouted with a gloomy expression. "Li Xiao, get out here!" The person who came cursed. Hearing this, the experts of the Heavenly Policy Mansion naturally appeared one after another. Several End-Realm experts of the Heavenly Policy Mansion appeared in the sky. They looked at the middle-aged man with a cold expression. One of them recognized this person and said with a serious expression, "Zuntian Blade Venerable." The person who came was naturally Dao Xiong, who had hurried over from the Saber sect. Dao Ju had met with trouble in the wood world. Moreover, he had fallen into the hands of an Emperor Realm expert. How could Dao Xiong not be worried? He originally thought that it would not be a problem to let Dao Ju be impudent for once. However, who would have thought that Li Xiao would be so unreliable and let his son go to the wood world? Dao Xiong knew nothing about this. He did not care about the experts of the Heavenly Policy Mansion. Soon, Li Xiao's figure appeared in front of Dao Xiong. When they saw Li Xiao, everyone respectfully bowed and said, "Greetings, Mansion Master." "Dao Xiong, let's talk downstairs." Li Xiao looked at Dao Xiong and said helplessly with a bitter smile. Dao Xiong coldly snorted when he heard Li Xiao's words. However, he did not refuse and followed Li Xiao into the cave. In the hall, Li Xiao, Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and Dao Xiong sat down one after another. They looked at Junwuya and Luo Xing. Dao Xiong nodded slightly as a greeting. He knew that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were also in the wood world. The situation was probably not good. After greeting Junwuya and Luo Xing, Dao Xiong looked at Li Xiao again and shouted with extreme dissatisfaction. Li Xiao, the space-time tunnel has not formed yet. The situation in the wood world is not clear. How can you easily send these little fellows to the wood world alone? This is ridiculous. You are the leader of a sect. How can you be so brainless? Dao Xiong didn't give Li Xiao any face at all. Hearing this, Li Xiao wasn't angry at all. After all, Dao Ju was really in trouble now. Speaking of which, he was indeed too careless. He always felt that the wood world wasn't dangerous, so he didn't make any preparations at all, which led to such an outcome. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 2100. Dao Xiong was obviously extremely angry because of his son's matter, so when he spoke, he didn't care about Li Xiao's feelings at all. Upon hearing his words, Junwuya spoke up. Dao Xiong was obviously extremely angry because of his son's matter, so when he spoke, he didn't care about Li Xiao's feelings at all. Upon hearing his words, Junwuya spoke up. Alright, you stubborn old man, it's useless to say this now. The most important thing is to think of a way to open the space-time channel as soon as possible and go to the wood world to save people. What was the use of Dao Xiong blaming Li Xiao now? Upon hearing Junwuya's words, Dao Xiong snorted coldly, but didn't say anything. Upon seeing this, Junwuya continued. Just now, the three of us have already discussed it. It's basically impossible to open the space-time channel as soon as possible. We can only forcefully expand it with brute force, and then two of us will support it while the other two will go to the wood world to save people. It was indeed impossible to open and stabilize the space-time channel to the wood world within a month, but it was possible to forcefully expand it so that the space-time channel could accommodate emperors. Moreover, with Junwuya and the other three working together, they could succeed in half a month at most. However, there was a problem with doing so. Although they could forcefully expand the space-time channel to the wood world, the space-time channel would become increasingly fragile at that time, and there was even the possibility of it collapsing at any time. In this way, there must be at least two emperors using their own spiritual energy to support the space-time channel, so that it wouldn't collapse in a short period of time. Therefore, Junwuya's plan was for the four of them to work together and first expand the space-time channel. Then, two of them would enter the wood world to save people, and the other two would stay behind to stabilize the space-time channel until they rescued people. This was the only way the four of them could think of at the moment. After all, Lu Tian only gave them a month. Upon hearing Junwuya's words, Dao Xiong snorted coldly, but didn't say anything more. He nodded and said, "That's the only way. But let me say this first, this time I will personally enter the wood world and personally twist off Lu Tian's head." Dao Xiong agreed to Junwuya's suggestion, but he wanted to personally enter the wood world. After all, Dao Ju was Dao Xiong's only son. Now that the situation was critical, Dao Xiong naturally wanted to personally take action. Junwuya's decision, Dao Xiong's decision. Junwuya nodded and said, "Li Xiao and Dao Xiong, you two will go. Luo Xing and I will be responsible for stabilizing the space-time channel. When the time comes, me and Luo Xing and I will be responsible for stabilizing the space-time channel." Of course. Li Xiao would definitely go. After all, the matters of lunar sky were directly related to Li Xiao. As a result, only Junwuya and Luo Xing were left behind. TSSSSSS head. Junwuya and the other three had already begun their operation. On the other hand, in the Wood Realm, after Dao Ju and Li Chun were captured alive, Litian took control of the Ghost Continent in just a few hours. It was indeed a piece of cake for an Emperor Realm figure to control a mere evil Ghost Continent. Moreover, Litian's way of doing things was very simple. Those who complied would prosper, and those who disobeyed would perish. Litian would slap any force that dared to oppose him to death. At this moment, in Taisong City, the second largest city on the Ghost Continent, all the sect heads of the major forces on the Ghost Continent who were still alive had gathered in the main hall. All of them had their heads lowered and were trembling. Litian was sitting on the main seat, while the young man beside him was standing beside him with a look of disdain on his face. Sweeping his gaze across all the sect masters, Litian said indifferently, "I don't care what method you use. Find those two fellas for me." The two fellas that Litian mentioned were naturally Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. The two of them had escaped, and Litian had ordered the various forces on the Ghost Continent to search for them. Upon hearing Litian's order, no one dared to object. They had already experienced Litian's brutality. He could even wipe out his own clan, let alone outsiders like them. They hurriedly nodded respectfully. Then, Litian waved his hand and gestured for everyone to leave. With Litian's permission, everyone left the main hall. Without any delay, they quickly mobilized their men and began to search the entire Ghost Continent for Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao's whereabouts. Previously, in order to prevent the Ghost clan from escaping, Li Chun had set up a spirit array on the Ghost Continent. This spirit array enveloped the entire Ghost Continent. No one could break through the spirit array and leave unless they were Emperor Realm experts. Originally, this formation was meant to trap the Ghost tribe, but now, it had become a cage for Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. If not for this formation, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao could have escaped from the Ghost Continent and even returned to the Great Thousand World through the space-time passage. However, it was impossible now. With the formation, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao could not leave the Ghost Continent. Moreover, the formation plate to activate the formation was in Li Chun's hands. Oh, no, it was already in Litian's hands. Therefore, there was no way for Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao to activate the formation. As the various sect leaders left one after another, only Litian and the young man were left in the main hall. As for Li Chun and Dao Ju, their cultivation had been sealed by Litian and they were locked in the dungeon of Taisong City. They would not die for the time being. Litian's expression remained unchanged as he called out faintly, "Sheng Master." Upon hearing Litian's words, the young man beside him bowed respectfully and greeted him. The young man's name was Sheng, and he was a disciple that Litian had accepted in the wood world when he was faking his death. He had the earth demon physique, and his strength was very strong. He was not weaker than the geniuses of the Great Thousand World. Over the years, Sheng had been following Litian and was personally guided by him in his cultivation. Litian looked at Sheng and nodded with satisfaction. "I'll leave those two boys to you. Don't let me down. I'll leave those trash to you as well. If they don't listen to me, just kill them." Sheng was fully in charge of capturing Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Upon hearing this, Sheng's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He then nodded confidently and replied, "Master, don't worry. I won't disappoint you." "All right, go ahead." Litian nodded and smiled. However, his smile looked a little creepy. Everything was handed over to Sheng to handle. Under Sheng's arrangement, in less than a day, all the major cities and even the villages on the Ghost Continent were plastered with wanted posters of Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. There were even portraits of the two on the posters. For a time, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao seemed to have no place to hide on the Ghost Continent. All the forces on the Ghost Continent were wantonly searching for their traces. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 2101. Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao's wanted portraits filled the entire Ghost Continent. Not only that, but even the demonic beasts deep in the mountains began to hunt for Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao's wanted portraits filled the entire Ghost Continent. Not only that, but even the demonic beasts deep in the mountains began to hunt for Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Due to the deterrence of Litian, the demonic beasts had no choice but to submit. This way, not only were there no places for Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao to hide in the human cities, villages, and even deep in the mountains and forests. Almost all the cultivators in the entire Ghost Continent joined the team to capture Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. In just 3 days, even though Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao had all the way, they couldn't leave the Ghost Continent and were eventually trapped in a place called the Heavenly Fall Abyss. They were chased all the way and eventually trapped in the Heavenly Fall Abyss. At that moment, all the exits of the Heavenly Fall Abyss were completely sealed. Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were trapped in the Heavenly Fall Abyss. After confirming the location of Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao, a sect leader in Taisong City respectfully came before Yin Sheng. He cupped his hands together and bowed before he spoke carefully. Young Master, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao are trapped in the Heavenly Fall Abyss. Young Master, we should. Yin Sheng was a disciple of Yin Litian. Apart from that, he was also extremely powerful. Besides, his personality was even more unreasonable and tyrannical than Yin Litian's. In just 3 days, Yin Sheng had slain more than a dozen sect leaders, and elders of various major forces. Therefore, when facing Yin Sheng, everyone was trembling in fear, afraid that they would accidentally provoke him. Yin Sheng could be said to have inherited Yin Litian's teachings, especially in terms of personality. Not only that, but he had also surpassed Yin Litian. After hearing the sect master's words, Yin Sheng, who was sitting on the main seat, said indifferently without changing his expression, Heavenly Fall Abyss, the formation that was set up to trap the dark ghost race has now become their cage. No one can be certain about the things in this world, don't you think so? With a sneer on his face, Yin Sheng seemed to be talking to himself, but at the same time, he seemed to be asking the sect leader. The sect leader was taken aback and didn't react for a moment. After a while, he came to his senses and nodded repeatedly. Yes. Yin Sheng seemed to have lost interest when he saw that the sect master had been scared out of his wits with a single glance. He calmly said, "Tell them to guard the Heavenly Descent Abyss. If those two escape, they will pay with their lives. This time, I will personally go to the Heavenly Descent Abyss to meet these so-called Heaven's Prides and evildoers." Yin Sheng wanted to capture Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao personally. Yin Sheng had long heard about the Heaven's Prides and evildoers of the Great Thousand World from Yin Litian. Even Yin Litian was full of praise for some Heaven's Prides and evildoers. Yin Sheng had been cultivating with Yin Litian and had never come into contact with the Heaven's Prides and evildoers of the Great Thousand World. Therefore, Yin Sheng was very interested in the strength of the Heaven's Prides and evildoers of the Great Thousand World. Since there was a chance this time, Yin Sheng naturally wanted to meet Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Hearing Yin Sheng's words, the sect leader nodded repeatedly in agreement before carefully retreating. More and more cultivators arrived at the Heaven Fall Abyss. They had completely surrounded the Heaven Fall Abyss. However, they did not make a move. Instead, they waited for Yin Sheng to arrive. Yin Sheng had already ordered that he would personally take action. The Heavenly Descent Abyss was completely sealed off, and Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao, who were trapped inside, were also thinking of ways to escape at this time. Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao could break out of the encirclement with their strength, but in the face of so many cultivators, it was obvious that they would have to pay a certain price. However, in this way, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao would be in even more danger. Originally, the two of them were like caged birds and turtles in a jar. There was no way for them to leave the Dark Ghost Continent. If they were injured at this time, they would be in danger. Therefore, after Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were trapped, the two of them didn't rush to break out of the encirclement. Instead, they observed the situation around them. At this time, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were sitting by a small stream in the Heavenly Descent Abyss. They had been running for several days and hadn't rested much. Now that they were trapped again, Xiao Xiao said with some disappointment, "I don't know how Dao Ju and Li Chun are doing. Master Li Zhao's soul avatar is definitely no match for Yin Litian." Because the two of them had escaped first, they didn't know what had happened afterward. However, Xiao Xiao was certain that Li Zhao's soul avatar alone couldn't stop Yin Litian. Therefore, Dao Ju and Li Chun were definitely in danger at this time. Xiao Chen didn't answer after hearing Xiao Chen's words. However, according to Xiao Chen's thoughts, Li Chun and Dao Ju should have been captured alive by Yin Litian at this time. For the time being, Xiao Chen didn't have the time to care about Li Chun and Dao Ju. He also didn't have the ability to save the two of them from Yin Litian. At this time, Xiao Chen was thinking about how to escape Yin Litian's pursuit and delay until Jun Wuya, Li Xiao, and the others came to rescue them. Although he didn't know when Jun Wuya and Li Xiao would come, Xiao Chen knew that since Li Xiao's soul avatar had arrived in the wood boundary, Jun Wuya and the others must have known what had happened in the wood boundary. Therefore, they would definitely find a way to come. The only thing Xiao Chen could do was to hold on until then. However, judging from the current situation, it wouldn't be easy to hold on until Jun Wuya and Li Xiao arrived. Xiao Chen gradually made up his mind. In his opinion, if the two of them acted together now, it would be very difficult for them to escape. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, Xiao Chen secretly made up his mind. Xiao Chen came up behind Xiao Xiao with a calm expression. Looking at Xiao Chen's actions, Xiao Xiao asked curiously, "Junior brother, why are you?" Xiao Xiao naturally wasn't wary of Xiao Chen. However, before she could finish her sentence, Xiao Chen pointed his finger at her forehead. Xiao Xiao instantly fainted. After knocking Xiao Xiao out, Xiao Chen whispered in her ear, "Senior sister, I'll lure them away. You be careful." Xiao Chen intended to use himself as bait to lure away the people outside the Heavenfall Abyss. This way, Xiao Xiao would have a chance to escape. Moreover, the two of them would act separately while Xiao Chen would attract attention. This way, Xiao Xiao's chances of escaping would be much higher. As for whether he would be captured or not, Xiao Chen couldn't care less. It was better for one person to be captured than both of them. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen carried Xiao Xiao to a relatively secluded place that he had already observed beforehand. Then, he walked out of the Heavenfall Abyss alone. Xiao Chen wanted to distract the people outside the Heavenfall Abyss and create an opportunity for Xiao Xiao to escape. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2102. The development of the situation in the Wood Realm was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Xiao Chen also did not expect that what should have been an extremely simple task would end up like this. The development of the situation in the Wood Realm was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Xiao Chen also did not expect that what should have been an extremely simple task would end up like this. However, there was no point in talking about this now. The most important thing now was to find a way to overcome the current crisis. He walked out of the Heavenfall Abyss alone. At the same time, the direction Xiao Chen chose was obviously the most heavily guarded place. This was because only by breaking out of the encirclement could Xiao Chen attract more attention, giving Xiao Xiao a better chance to escape. The Heavenfall Abyss wasn't very large. Soon, Xiao Chen arrived at the northern exit. From afar, he could see that a large number of cultivators had already gathered at the exit. These cultivators came from various major forces on the Ghost Continent. They were all following Yinxing's orders to surround Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Everyone was resting with their eyes closed when they suddenly saw Xiao Chen walking slowly toward them. In order to attract everyone's attention, Xiao Chen naturally didn't bother to hide his figure. As soon as he walked out of the Heavenfall Abyss and saw Xiao Chen, someone exclaimed in surprise. "He's here!" They immediately noticed Xiao Chen. Immediately after, the cultivators blocking the exit drew their weapons as though they were facing a formidable enemy. They looked at Xiao Chen with extremely solemn expressions. Xiao Chen's expression didn't change in the face of everyone's gazes. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. Xiao Chen's aura was extremely sharp. Sword chi revolved around him. Then, without saying anything, Xiao Chen moved his feet and charged toward the crowd in an instant. There were at least tens of thousands of cultivators in front of Xiao Chen. However, their cultivation bases weren't high. Most of them were immortal venerables. There were very few immortal emperors. As for immortal emperors, they were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. In Xiao Chen's eyes, they were just a bunch of ants. However, they had the advantage of numbers. Xiao Chen charged into the crowd like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep. He slashed out with the dustless sword, killing hundreds of people with a single slash. Xiaochen wasn't a kind person. On the contrary, the number of people who had died at Xiaochen's hands was not small. In just a dozen breaths of time, the tens of thousands of cultivators had been killed. Xiaochen's. Therefore, as the battle continued, they only dared to surround Xiaochen from afar. No one dared to take the initiative to attack. They didn't retreat, but they didn't dare to take the initiative to attack either. Xiaochen didn't care about this. He walked all the way out of the heavenly abyss. Xiaochen was surrounded by many cultivators. Each of them had a look of fear on their faces. Apparently, these cultivators from the Ghost Continent had never seen a Heaven's Pride that possessed such strength at such a young age. Compared to the Great Thousand World, the martial Tao of the Wood World was obviously far behind. Therefore, they were terrified when facing Xiaochen. They really didn't know how Xiaochen cultivated to have such terrifying strength. They didn't dare to stop Xiaochen. Of course, they didn't dare to let Xiaochen leave either. They could only gather around Xiaochen from afar. The scene was a little comical for a moment. However, just as Xiaochen and the other cultivators were in the process of advancing and retreating, a sneer suddenly sounded. Then, a young man in a black robe appeared in front of Xiaochen. It seems that this group of trash really can't stop you. The young man was Yinsheng, who had rushed over from Taisong City. When Yinsheng appeared, he directly blocked Xiaochen's path. Seeing this, Xiaochen sneered. Why don't you give it a try? He had some impression of Yinsheng. When he was in Mu City, Yinsheng accompanied Yin Litian. He should be a disciple of Yin Litian. It was easy to guess Yinsheng's identity. When he heard Xiaochen's words, Yinsheng sneered. Of course. In fact, I have long wanted to see if the Heaven's Pride in the Great Thousand World is as strong as Master said. It's just that I haven't had the chance. However, today, I have the chance. As he spoke, Yinsheng moved his thoughts, and a black spear appeared in his hand. With the spear in his hand, a terrifying aura suddenly rose from his body. Yinsheng was about the same age as Xiaochen, and his cultivation had also reached the entry level of the Tao realm. In terms of cultivation alone, Yinsheng's cultivation was comparable to Xiaochen's. Feeling Yinsheng's powerful aura and strong fighting spirit, Xiaochen was naturally not afraid. He smiled faintly and said calmly, I should not let you down. That's good. Hearing this, Yinsheng sneered and took the initiative to attack Xiaochen. The long sword in his hand was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. It pierced toward Xiaochen at lightning speed. In the face of Yinsheng's attack, Xiaochen was not afraid at all. He had no intention of dodging. In a head-on collision, Xiaochen also slashed out with his sword. The sword light and the spear light collided violently in the air. Then, the shockwaves spread in all directions. The terrifying shockwaves instantly killed many of the cultivators present. Most of the cultivators present were only at the immortal venerable realm. Naturally, they were unable to withstand the shockwaves from the battle between Xiaochen and Yinsheng. In just an instant, thousands of people were killed by the shockwaves from the battle. However, Xiaochen and Yinsheng's expression did not change. Xiaochen naturally would not feel anything because of the deaths of these people. As for Yinsheng, it was even more impossible for him to feel anything. The terrifying shockwaves spread wildly. Faced with the hellish scene, the surrounding people fled in all directions. They did not pay any attention to them. In the first exchange, Xiaochen and Yinsheng were evenly matched. Neither of them had the upper hand. In response, Yinsheng revealed an excited smile and said, Not bad. This is getting interesting. As he spoke, he took the initiative to attack Xiaochen with his spear. Seeing this, Xiaochen did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. For a moment, the two of them were engaged in a fierce battle. Looking at the fierce battle between the two of them, the crowd who had retreated far away were shocked. Instead, their shock became even more intense. In their eyes, Xiaochen and Yinsheng were simply inhuman. Every time they collided, the ground would be torn apart like a piece of paper. At the same time, a series of sonic booms could be heard. Cracks constantly appeared in the space. Some of them even directly shattered it. Almost everyone present had never seen a battle of this level. In fact, they had never even heard of it, let alone seen it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2103. For many warriors in the wood world, warriors at the level of Xiaochen and Yinsheng were like gods. They were not people they could come into contact with at all. For many warriors in the wood world, warriors at the level of Xiaochen and Yinsheng were like gods. They were not people they could come into contact with at all. Now, the gods were fighting fiercely in front of them. The collapsed ground and the torn space all displayed the terrifying strength of the two men. In a short period of time, the two men had already exchanged hundreds of blows. It had to be said that Yinsheng's strength was indeed very strong. At the very least, he must have reached the level of the great Thousand Worlds geniuses. Xiaochen had a better understanding of Yinsheng's strength. At the same time, Yinsheng also knew the strength of the great Thousand Worlds geniuses. Compared to himself, Yinsheng was not inferior at all. Up until now, the two men were still evenly matched. No one had the upper hand. At this moment, a thick black gas suddenly emerged from Yinsheng's body. This black gas was exactly the same as the black gas that Yin had displayed. The body of Earth Terminus. After a long battle, Yinsheng finally decided to use the body of Earth Terminus. Black Qi spread out. This black Qi was filled with corrosive power. Once one came into contact with it, even one's spiritual energy would be corroded. The reason why Yinsheng was accepted as a disciple by Yin Litian was because he had the Earth Demon body, which was the same as Yin Litian's. Yin Litian also had the Earth Demon body. Therefore, most of his cultivation techniques and martial skills could only be practiced by those with the Earth Demon body. Yinsheng was obviously the best successor for Yin Litian. After displaying the Earth Demon body, Yinsheng became completely serious. In this regard, Xiaochen did not have the slightest bit of carelessness. He immediately displayed the sword body. The sword realm erupted and instantly enveloped Yinsheng. The thick and sharp sword qi was like a barrier that firmly trapped Yinsheng. Otherwise, the black gas around him would spread out. The black aura around Yinsheng was unable to spread as he was enveloped by the sword qi, so it was naturally no longer a threat to Xiaochen. However, Yinsheng was not anxious about this. Instead, he laughed coldly and said, "Do you think you can stop me like this?" He wanted to use the sword qi to seal his body of terra termina. As soon as Yinsheng finished speaking, the dense sword qi that enveloped him began to slowly dissipate. Clearly, it had been corroded by Yinsheng's aura of terra termina. It could even corrode sword qi. However, Xiaochen wasn't too shocked by this. Since the Earth Demon body could be considered a top physique, it naturally wouldn't be easy to deal with. As he watched the sword aura that enveloped Yinsheng slowly dissipate, Xiaochen's mind moved. Immediately, countless blood swords shot towards Yinsheng. Within the sword realm, Xiaochen's attacking power was clearly magnified. Faced with the attack of countless blood swords, Yinsheng revealed a cold smile. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air. Immediately, more than 10 warriors from the Dark Ghost continent were pulled over and blocked in front of Yinsheng. Faced with Xiaochen's attack, Yinsheng had no intention of dodging. He also didn't choose to take it head-on. Instead, he used people as shields. The countless blood swords ruthlessly struck the dozen or so warriors from the Dark Ghost continent. Instantly, the dozen or so people died on the spot, while Yinsheng was unscathed. Seeing Yinsheng's action, Xiaochen frowned slightly. Using others as shields was something that Xiaochen couldn't do. However, it was clearly nothing to Yinsheng. After blocking Xiaochen's attack, Yinsheng laughed coldly and said, "It's my turn." As he spoke, Yinsheng pointed in the air. Immediately, a stream of black gas shot towards Xiaochen like a sharp arrow. This was the Earth Terminus Qi. Obviously, Xiaochen couldn't take it head-on. Once he was hit by the Earth Terminus Chi, although it wouldn't be fatal, it would be very troublesome. After all, it wasn't easy to get rid of the Earth Terminus Chi. He chose to dodge immediately. Seeing this, Yinxing didn't stop. He kept pointing his finger and streams of black Earth Terminus Chi shot towards Xiaochen crazily. How long can you dodge? Actually, it's very easy to deal with. Aren't there countless shields here? You can use them to block my attack. Yinxing's words were filled with mockery. He was telling Xiaochen that he could use the warriors from the Dark Ghost Continent as shields like him. This way, he could block his attack. However, when he heard this, Xiaochen said coldly, "A person like you is no different from a beast. Using the weak as shields." Xiaochen wouldn't do such a thing. As his voice faded, Xiaochen shouted in a deep voice, "Sword wall." All of a sudden, countless blood swords formed a barrier in front of Xiaochen, protecting him within it. Even the earthly demon Qi, which was full of yin energy, did not have any effect on the sword wall after hitting it. Xiaochen used the sword wall to block Yinxing's attack. However, Yinxing sneered and said, "Don't you know that my Earth Terminus Qi can corrode everything in the world? How long can you defend against it?" As he spoke, Yinxing stretched out his palms. In an instant, a terrifying stream of black gas poured down like a waterfall and violently hit Xiaochen's sword wall. Black gas filling the sky. Yinxing shouted in a low voice. The Earth Terminus Qi constantly hit Xiaochen's sword wall. One was attacking and the other was defending. At the same time, Yinxing sneered and said, "Your strength isn't great. However, it's a pity that you're too pedantic and naive. You don't know how to use things that are beneficial to you. You'd rather use the sword wall to defend against my Earth Terminus Qi than use these ants to defend against my Earth Terminus Qi." Xiaochen didn't want to use the warriors from the Dark Ghost Continent as shields. In Yinxing's eyes, this was naive and pedantic. Hearing this, Xiaochen said indifferently, "People who walk different paths can't make plans together. Talking to someone like you is like playing the lute to a cow." Xiaochen had his own principles. He couldn't be like Yinxing. Similarly, Yinxing naturally had his own thoughts. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Yinxing sneered and said, "Ah, this world is one where the strong are respected. As for the weak, they can only be toys in the hands of the strong, objects to be used." Yinxing didn't have the slightest pity for the weak. He only wanted to use them. In Yinxing's eyes, those who had no value were no different from trash. Following Yinxing's words, cracks began to appear on the sword wall in front of Xiaochen. Many of the countless blood swords were corroded by the Earth Terminus Qi and began to show signs of breaking. Sensing that Xiaochen's sword wall was about to break, the smile on Yinxing's face became colder and colder. "See, this is the price. If you could let go of the pedantic thoughts in your heart, you wouldn't have ended up like this. Isn't it the best choice to let those ants die for you? Their deaths aren't regrettable, but you have to pay the price for your naivety. Break. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 2104. Yinxing shouted coldly. Seeing that Xiaochen's sword wall was about to shatter, the coldness in Yinxing's eyes intensified. Yinxing shouted coldly. Seeing that Xiaochen's sword wall was about to shatter, the coldness in Yinxing's eyes intensified. After fighting with Xiaochen for so long, Yinxing admitted that Xiaochen's strength was indeed extraordinary. However, apart from his strength, Yinxing felt that Xiaochen was too pedantic. There were so many warriors from the Dark Ghost Continent around them. Xiaochen could have used them as a shield like Yinxing did. However, Xiaochen did not do so. In Yinxing's opinion, this was simply naive. Cracks continuously appeared on the sword wall. However, contrary to Yinxing's expectations, Xiaochen's face did not show the slightest trace of panic. His face was still calm as he spoke indifferently. "I don't need to use other people's bodies as a shield to deal with you. As he spoke, the sword wall in front of Xiaochen suddenly shattered. Countless blood swords were shattered into pieces. However, just as the sword wall shattered, before Yin Xing could react, Xiaochen shouted softly, "Strangle!" As he spoke, countless sword fragments flickered with a red blood light. After which, they attacked Yin Xing with lightning speed. The sword wall was shattered. However, Yin Xing clearly did not expect that Xiaochen would have such a move waiting for him. Seeing the sword fragments fiercely attacking him, Yin Xing's expression changed. Although he reacted immediately and formed a layer of protection around himself with the Earth Terminus aura, in the face of the countless sword fragments, Yin Xing's defense was quickly shattered. He wanted to defend against Xiaochen's attack, but he failed in the end. Xiaochen's attack came too suddenly and was extremely powerful. The strangle of the sword fragments was a killing move that Xiaochen cultivated over the years after gradually mastering the sword body. After his defense was broken, countless sword fragments, like sharp knives, instantly enveloped Yin Xing. Blood splattered everywhere as numerous wounds quickly appeared on Yin Xing's body. Xiaochen had no time to react at all. After successfully injuring Yin Xing, he had no intention of stopping. He shouted coldly, "Unorthodox methods are ultimately unorthodox methods. If you want to become stronger, you can only rely on your own efforts." Xiaochen did not give Yin Xing any opportunity to speak after he finished speaking. His entire body turned into a ray of light and disappeared from the spot. When Xiaochen left, none of the surrounding warriors from the Ghost Continent dared to stop him. Everyone only dared to watch Xiaochen leave from afar. Finally, he disappeared, but no one dared to stop Xiaochen. After about 10 breaths of time after Xiaochen left, Yin Xing finally destroyed the countless sword fragments around him. His body was surrounded by wisps of black gas, and his body was covered in blood. Even his clothes had long been dyed red with blood. With a horrified expression, Yin Xing looked in the direction that Xiaochen had escaped. He clenched his teeth tightly, as if he was going to crush him. Yin Xing shouted coldly, "Chase after him. If I don't catch him, I swear I won't give up." In his first exchange with Xiaochen, Yin Xing was obviously at a disadvantage. The reason for this was that Yin Xing had been careless. When he saw that Xiaochen's sword wall was about to shatter, Yin Xing felt that he had victory in his grasp. He did not think about how to deal with Xiaochen's sudden counterattack. To put it bluntly, Yin Xing did not have enough combat experience. Over the years, Yin Xing's cultivation had reached the level of the great Thousand Worlds geniuses under Yin Litian's guidance. However, compared to Xiaochen, Dao Ju, and other geniuses, Yin Xing's biggest weakness was his lack of combat experience. In fact, it could be said that he was very lacking in combat experience. It made sense. After all, Yin Xing had spent most of his time cultivating. He hadn't fought anyone at all. Even if he did, he would only spar with Yin Litian. However, Yin Litian was an Emperor Realm figure after all. The difference in strength and cultivation between the two of them was too great. In fact, sparring with Yin Litian was not very meaningful. Yin Xing was in a real life and death battle, and he was fighting against a genius of the same level as himself. In this regard, Yin Xing was obviously inferior to Xiaochen. Due to his lack of combat experience, Xiaochen successfully seized the opportunity to attack Yin Xing. With a counterattack, Yin Xing was severely injured. Naturally, Yin Xing could not accept such an outcome. He immediately ordered everyone to chase after Yin Litian. However, as soon as Yin Xing's voice fell, Yin Litian's figure suddenly appeared in the sky. Although it was only a spirit doppelganger and not his real body, Yin Xing still cupped his hands respectfully and greeted Yin Litian. "Greetings, Master." Yin Litian's expression did not change as he faced Yin Xing's greeting. "Do you know why you lost?" Upon hearing Yin Litian's words, Yin Xing fell silent. Yin Litian did not continue to make things difficult for Yin Xing. Instead, he continued to say, "All these years, you've been busy with your cultivation. You haven't experienced any actual combat at all. This is especially true for those monstrous geniuses who are at the same level as you. You should know that strength is important in a battle, but when two people of similar strength fight, the one who wins in the end will definitely be the one with more battle experience. Moreover, in a battle, you must remain calm at all times. Don't be complacent when you have the upper hand, and don't give up when you have the disadvantage. You must be as calm as still water. Only then will you be able to detect the flaws in your opponent's attack or defense. Yin Litian seemed to have known that Yin Sheng would lose the battle against Xiaochen, so he didn't blame Yin Sheng. Yin Sheng nodded when he heard Yin Litian's words. This disciple will remember Master's teachings. Alright, a single victory or defeat doesn't mean much. Since your Master has already come out, you'll have plenty of chances to fight against these monstrous geniuses in the future. Don't take this defeat to heart. Yin Litian replied. Yin Sheng was somewhat unwilling to accept Yin Litian's words. But Master, isn't this disciple going to chase after that kid? That's why I said you weren't calm enough. This defeat has made you so angry that you can't look at things calmly. Are you finished? Are you going to chase after two people this time? Yin Litian asked when he saw Yin Sheng's expression of disbelief. Two people? Yin Sheng was taken aback when he heard Yin Litian's words. He subconsciously looked towards the heaven-fall abyss and immediately understood what Yin Litian meant. He looked at Yin Litian and said in embarrassment. Master, you mean? Yin Litian smiled and nodded when he saw that Yin Sheng had understood what he meant. That's right. Go. I will hold the line for you in this battle. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. Just take it as a form of training. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 2105. In the battle with Xiaochen, Yin Sheng was defeated due to his immature fighting spirit. On the other hand, Xiaochen was able to break out of the encirclement. None of the Dark Ghost Clan's cultivators dared to stop Xiaochen. Of course, after Xiaochen broke out of the encirclement, he did not deliberately hide his whereabouts. His speed was not very fast either. His main purpose was to lure Yin Sheng to chase after him and create a better opportunity for Xiao Xiao to escape. Originally, Xiaochen's plan had succeeded. After being defeated, Yin Sheng was indeed angry and wanted to chase after Xiaochen. However, Yin Litian's appearance at the last moment completely ruined Xiaochen's plan. Xiaochen's plan could indeed infuriate Yin Sheng and make him chase after him. However, it was useless against an old monster like Yin Litian. Yin Sheng immediately reacted to Yin Litian's words. That's right, there should be another person besides Xiaochen. All along, Yin Sheng's attention had been focused on Xiaochen. In the end, he actually neglected Xiao Xiao. After Yin Litian's reminder, Yin Sheng reacted and immediately turned his gaze to the heaven-fall abyss. Yin Sheng might be somewhat inexperienced because he had been in closed-door cultivation all year round, but he was not a fool. After being reminded by Yin Litian, Yin Sheng quickly guessed Xiaochen's plan. Originally, Xiaochen and Xiao Xiao had escaped together. Moreover, according to the intelligence, the two had always been moving together. However, only Xiaochen had appeared earlier. There was no doubt that Xiao Xiao was still in the heaven-fall abyss. As for Xiaochen's plan, Yin Sheng must have been to lure everyone away and create an opportunity for Xiao Xiao to escape. Fortunately, Yin Litian had arrived in time. Otherwise, Yin Sheng would have fallen into Xiaochen's trap. Yin Sheng cupped his hands towards Yin Litian and said in a deep voice, Master, don't worry. This disciple will not disappoint you again. With that, Yin Sheng flew into the heaven-fall abyss. In the heavenly fall abyss, Xiao Xiao, who had been knocked unconscious by Xiaochen, had already woken up. Furthermore, Xiao Xiao had sensed the aura of the battle between Xiaochen and Yin Sheng outside the heavenly fall abyss. The clever Xiao Xiao naturally guessed Xiaochen's intentions at the first moment. He cursed in his heart. Originally, Xiao Xiao had planned to face the enemy together with Xiaochen. However, just as Xiao Xiao was about to act, Xiaochen had already defeated Yin Sheng and successfully escaped. Xiao Xiao gave up on this idea and began to head in the opposite direction. Xiaochen had created such a good opportunity for himself. Naturally, Xiao Xiao couldn't let it go to waste. Although he was still a little unhappy, Xiao Xiao didn't want to let Xiao Chen's efforts go to waste. Unfortunately, just as Xiao Xiao was about to leave the Heavenfall Abyss from the other side, Yin Sheng, who had been warned by Yin Lidian, caught up with her. Soon, he found traces of Xiao Xiao. Yin Sheng's figure appeared out of thin air in front of Xiao Xiao, completely blocking her path. Xiao Xiao was slightly taken aback when she saw Yin Sheng. She didn't expect that Yin Sheng would see through Xiao Chen's plan. Instead of chasing after Xiao Chen, he had come to the Heavenfall Abyss to capture her. Xiao Xiao thought that Yin Sheng had seen through Xiao Chen's plan. However, it was Yin Litian's appearance that allowed Yin Sheng to see through her plan. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, a faint smile suddenly appeared on Yin Sheng's face. What a beauty! Come with me. I don't want to hurt you. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, Yin Sheng's eyes flashed with a hint of greed. This was the first time he had seen such a beauty. Moreover, Xiao Xiao was also a supreme talent in the Great Thousand World. She was worthy of him. At first glance, he developed feelings of admiration for Xiao Xiao. Unfortunately, in the face of Yin Sheng's admiration, Xiao Xiao only felt disgusted. She immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Stop me if you can." After saying that, Xiao Xiao didn't give Yin Sheng any chance to reply. She immediately stretched out her hand, and a crescent moon suddenly attacked Yin Sheng. Although Xiao Xiao was a woman, her combat strength wasn't weak at all. In the face of Xiao Xiao's attack, Yin Sheng didn't dare to be careless. He immediately displayed the earth-ferocious body and faced his enemy with all his strength. The two of them fought fiercely. As he had lost to Xiao Chen previously, Yin Sheng was obviously calmer this time. After learning the lesson of his defeat in the battle with Xiao Chen, Yin Sheng obviously became more difficult to deal with. For a moment, the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. After the battle with Xiao Xiao, Yin Sheng had to admit that this woman was very strong. At least, she wasn't weaker than him. As he attacked, Yin Sheng said with determination, "Beauty, I will definitely make you my woman in this life." He expressed his love for her in a straightforward manner. However, when she heard this, Xiao Xiao coldly shouted, "Get lost." After saying that, her attacks became more and more fierce. However, Yin Sheng wasn't afraid at all. He continued to fight fiercely with Xiao Xiao. The two of them were evenly matched. After fighting fiercely for a long time, neither of them could do anything to the other. However, just as the two of them were fighting fiercely, Yin Litian suddenly attacked. Although it was only a spiritual avatar, it still had the strength of an end-realm expert. Yin Litian clenched his fist across the air and immediately captured Xiao Xiao. While the two of them were still fighting fiercely, Xiao Xiao was suddenly captured by Yin Litian. Seeing this, Yin Sheng panicked and shouted, "Master, don't hurt her." Yin Sheng was actually pleading for Xiao Xiao. It was obvious that he really liked her. Perhaps it was because Yin Sheng had never come into contact with such an outstanding woman like Xiao Xiao in all these years. Hearing Yin Sheng's words, Yin Litian didn't harm Xiao Xiao. He merely sealed Xiao Xiao's cultivation and handed him over to Yin Sheng. "I'll leave this woman to you. You should know what to do next." It seemed like Yin Litian wasn't unhappy. Hearing this, Yin Sheng gently helped Xiao Xiao up. However, Xiao Xiao didn't appreciate it at all. She broke free and shouted coldly, "Let go." Xiao Xiao didn't have a good impression of Yin Sheng. However, Yin Sheng didn't care at all. After letting go of Xiao Xiao, he cupped his hands and bowed to Yin Litian. "Master, don't worry. I understand." Yin Litian nodded slightly when he heard Yin Sheng's words. Then, his spiritual avatar slowly dissipated. After Yin Litian left, Xiao Xiao fell into Yin Sheng's hands. Yin Sheng looked at Xiao Xiao. His expression returned to normal. "I won't hurt you. However, I need you to act as bait to lure out Xiao Chen. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2106. After capturing Xiao Xiao, he could naturally use him to lure out Xiao Chen. Yin Sheng was well aware of this. Upon hearing this, Xiao Xiao coldly snorted and said, "My junior brother is not so foolish as to jump into a trap despite knowing it is." After capturing Xiao Xiao, he could naturally use him to lure out Xiao Chen. Yin Sheng was well aware of this. Upon hearing this, Xiao Xiao coldly snorted and said, "My junior brother is not so foolish as to jump into a trap despite knowing it is." That's hard to say. Aren't there such fools in this world? Despite knowing it's impossible, he still insists on doing it. Upon hearing this, Yin Sheng smiled. After which, he waved his hand and left with Xiao Xiao. Yin Sheng did not continue to send people to guard the heavenly fall abyss. In his opinion, as long as he had Xiao Xiao in his hands, he was not afraid that Xiao Chen would not come. He directly brought Xiao Xiao back to Taisong City. Less than 15 minutes after the two of them left, a figure appeared at the place where Xiao Xiao was previously captured. This figure was undoubtedly Xiao Chen. Originally, Xiao Chen planned to lure Yin Sheng and the rest away to create an opportunity for Xiao Xiao. However, after breaking out of the encirclement, Xiao Chen discovered that Yin Sheng and the rest did not chase after him. Worried, he took the risk and returned to the heavenly fall abyss. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen was still a step too late. At this moment, Xiao Xiao had already been captured by Yin Sheng and brought to Taisong City. There were still some remnants of the aura left behind from the battle between Yin Sheng and Xiao Xiao. Xiao Chen frowned slightly. There was no trace of Xiao Xiao. Xiao Chen had already guessed what had happened in his heart. He did not expect Yin Sheng to see through his plan. Instead of chasing after him, Yin Sheng took action and captured Xiao Xiao. However, there was one thing that Xiao Chen found strange. With Yin Sheng's strength, it should not be an easy task to capture Xiao Xiao alive. Moreover, it had only been a short period of time. It was impossible for Yin Sheng to accomplish this alone. It would not be easy for Yin Sheng to capture Xiao Xiao alive with his own strength. Moreover, in such a short period of time, there would definitely be others who would make a move. In the entire Ghost Continent, the only person Xiao Chen could think of who had the strength to do this was Yin Lidian. Other than Yin Lidian, no one else had the strength to do so. Xiao Chen had guessed that Yin Lidian had personally taken action to capture Xiao Xiao. After searching around the Heavenfall Abyss, Xiao Chen discovered that Yin Sheng had already withdrawn all the cultivators around the Heavenfall Abyss. At this time, there was no one else around the Heavenfall Abyss. Xiao Chen didn't expect Xiao Xiao to be captured. Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't know where Xiao Xiao was taken by Yin Sheng. Even if he wanted to save Xiao Xiao, he didn't have a target. He could only wait patiently for an opportunity. He directly left the Heavenfall Abyss. Xiao Chen planned to find a place to hide first. At the same time, he would inquire about Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, and Dao Ju's whereabouts. A day passed quickly after the battle in the Heavenfall Abyss. During this day, Yin Sheng was not in a hurry to capture Xiao Chen. After seeing Xiao Xiao return to Taisong City, Yin Sheng did not imprison Xiao Xiao in the dungeon. Instead, he brought her back to his residence and served her with good food and drinks. Except for her cultivation being sealed and her being under house arrest, Xiao Xiao's treatment in other aspects was not bad. Yin Sheng also didn't do anything excessive to Xiao Xiao. According to Yin Sheng's own words, he didn't want to use force on a woman. Sooner or later, Yin Sheng would make Xiao Xiao accept him and fall in love with him. Xiao Xiao naturally scoffed at Yin Sheng's words. However, Yin Sheng didn't care about it at all. After settling Xiao Xiao down, an order was issued from Taisong City the next day. This order was posted all over the major cities and villages. The order was very simple. It was only one sentence, and it was written to Xiao Chen. If you want to save Xiao Xiao, go to Taisong City. 3 days. Xiao Chen naturally understood the meaning of these words. After the order was sent out, Yin Sheng sat calmly like a fisherman, patiently waiting for Xiao Chen, the fat fish, to take the bait. In the backyard, Yin Sheng was drinking wine by himself. At the same time, he whispered softly, "Xiao Chen, I won't let you escape this time." As long as Xiaochen dared to enter Taisong City, Yinsheng was confident that he would be able to capture him. This time, he wouldn't let Xiaochen escape like last time. While Yinsheng was waiting confidently for Xiaochen to take the bait, in an inconspicuous village on the Ghost Continent, a man wearing a bamboo hat quietly looked at the order posted at the entrance of the village. He unconsciously clenched his fists tightly. This man was naturally Xiaochen. When he passed by the village, he inadvertently saw the order issued from Taisong City. Xiaochen understood the meaning behind it at a glance. Xiao Xiao was indeed captured by Yinsheng. Moreover, she should be imprisoned in Taisong City. As for Yinsheng's order, Xiaochen naturally knew that this was his plan. Using Xiao Xiao to lure Xiaochen out was an obvious scheme. Yinsheng was basically telling Xiaochen that he had set up an inescapable net in Taisong City, so it was up to Xiaochen whether he would come or not. Xiaochen looked at the order in front of him and clenched his fists tightly. The coldness in his eyes disappeared. At this moment, an old man carrying a shoulder pole slowly walked to Xiaochen's side. This old man didn't have any cultivation. He was just an ordinary old man. He walked side by side with Xiaochen. The old man also looked at the order at the entrance of the village with great interest. Because this order was issued today, many people hadn't seen it. After looking at it with great interest for a moment, the old man chuckled and said, "Why can't these adults understand such simple logic? By saying this, aren't you telling them that I've already set a trap and are just waiting for them to jump into it? If that's the case, who would still go, unless they're a fool?" The old man saw through Yinsheng's intention. In the old man's opinion, since they knew it was a trap, who would still jump into it? Even an old man who had never left the village in his life understood this principle. Xiaochen naturally understood it. However, after hearing this, Xiaochen said indifferently, "Old man, do you think this person won't go?" "Of course not. Is there even a need to ask?" "Young man, if you know it's a trap, would you still jump into it?" Hearing this, the old man smiled and said. Then, he picked up the shoulder pole again and walked towards his home. Looking at the old man's back, Xiaochen laughed at himself. Unfortunately, there really are fools in this world. They know it's a trap, but they still jump into it. After saying this, Xiaochen took a step forward and his figure instantly disappeared. In this small village, no one realized that a person called Xiaochen had come. Xiaochen's arrival and disappearance didn't alarm anyone in the village. At this moment, Xiaochen was like the fool that the old man said. He was rushing towards Taisong City. Chapter 2107. The order from Taisong City was posted all over the major cities and villages on the Ghost Continent. Everyone knew that this was a trap set up by Yinsheng. He wanted to lure Xiaochen into a trap. Just as the old man had said, only a fool would go to such a place. However, perhaps Xiaochen was the fool that the old man had mentioned. After seeing this news, Xiaochen rushed to Taisong City without any hesitation. Xiao Xiao had fallen into Yinsheng's hands. No matter what, Xiaochen would not leave Xiao Xiao behind. Even though he knew that Taisong City was a dangerous place for him, Xiaochen still had to give it a try. Even if he had to lose his life, he would not hesitate. Xiaochen rushed to Taisong City. At the same time, Yinsheng had already set up everything in Taisong City. He was just waiting for Xiaochen to walk into the trap. As long as Xiaochen dared to come, Yinsheng was confident that he would not let Xiaochen return alive. Taisong City was very quiet at night. The originally bustling city seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep at this moment. The streets that used to be filled with people were now empty. In Yinsheng's mansion, Yinsheng had arrived at the courtyard where Xiao Xiao lived. The two of them sat in the pavilion in the courtyard. To be precise, Xiao Xiao was forced to come here. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, the love in Yinsheng's eyes became even more intense. Over the past few days, Yinsheng had come to visit Xiao Xiao almost every day. Moreover, he had never made things difficult for her. Other than not giving Xiao Xiao freedom, Yinsheng was satisfied with everything else. Xiao Xiao's eyes were still filled with dense coldness. She looked to the side and ignored Yinsheng. Yinsheng did not care about this. He changed the topic and said with a smile, "I have already released the news. Do you think that Xiaochen will come to save you?" Yinsheng did not hide anything from Xiao Xiao about his plan. There was nothing to hide about this plan. Even if Yinsheng did not say it, Xiao Xiao could guess it herself. Moreover, not only Xiao Xiao, everyone clearly knew Yinsheng's goal. However, after hearing Yinsheng's words, Xiao Xiao glared at him and said, "You are shameless. Ha, nothing is too deceitful in war. Moreover, I have already clearly told him that the current Taisong city is a tiger's den. Whether he comes or not is entirely up to him. How can he be shameless?" Yinsheng laughed in a clear voice when he heard Xiao Xiao's scolding. After saying that, Yinsheng stood up and walked out of the courtyard without waiting for Xiao Xiao's reply. "Xiao Xiao, you will become my woman one day. As for that Xiaochen, I will spare his life for your sake." Ha! Laughing heartily, Yinsheng left the courtyard. Xiao Xiao, who was sitting alone in the courtyard, looked at the sky with a worried expression and softly muttered, "Junior brother." Xiao Xiao did not want Xiaochen to come, because it was undoubtedly a suicide mission. However, Xiao Xiao knew Xiao Chen's character very well. Given Xiao Chen's character, Xiaochen would definitely come if he knew that Xiao Xiao was in Taisong City. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. There was only 1 day left before the 3-day deadline given by Yinsheng. The last day was also the most likely time for Xiaochen to show up. On that day, early in the morning, Yinsheng personally oversaw the situation. All the sect masters and lords of the Dark Ghost Continent also gathered in Taisong City. At this time, the common people in Taisong City had already been driven away. The entire Taisong City was filled with warriors from all the major factions of the Ghostine Continent. These people gathered in Taisong City for only one purpose, and that was to surround Xiaochen. Once Xiaochen appeared, they would swarm him and take him down. A large number of warriors were waiting for Xiaochen in Taisong City. The 4 city gates of Taisong City were also open at this time, as if inviting Xiaochen to enter the city. While everyone waited as if they were facing a formidable enemy, Xiaochen finally appeared outside Taisong City. Looking at the open city gates, there was not a single guard. Xiaochen did not show much emotion on his face. He had already sensed that there were many warriors hiding in Taisong City at this time. These warriors were obviously prepared by Yinsheng for him. It was almost impossible to sneak into Taisong City at this time. The only way was to force his way in. Xiaochen had no other choice. "Yinsheng, you'd better pray that you didn't do anything to my senior sister. Otherwise, I will make you regret it," Xiaochen muttered in his heart. Then, he walked toward Taisong City. Xiaochen was so anxious because he did not know about Xiao Xiao's current situation. Moreover, he knew that there was no way to sneak into Taisong City now. Therefore, he simply swaggered in. Anyway, there would be a battle sooner or later. Xiaochen did not have the slightest intention of hiding his whereabouts. Therefore, many warriors in the city already knew that Xiaochen had come before he arrived in the capital city. In the hall of Yinsheng's residence, someone had already told Yinsheng about Xiaochen's appearance. Hearing that Xiaochen had indeed come, a faint smile appeared on Yinsheng's face. "Let's act according to the plan. I'll wait for him here, provided that he can come here." Hearing Yinsheng's words, the various sect leaders and sect masters present all wanted to say something, but hesitated. Yinsheng's plan was to use their disciples and elders as cannon fodder. All the sect leaders and sect masters were well aware of Xiaochen's strength. It was almost impossible for them to capture Xiaochen with their strength alone. Even if they succeeded in the end, the price they had to pay would definitely be incomparably huge. Everyone's heart was bleeding, but they did not dare to disobey Yinsheng's order. As long as someone dared to open their mouth to oppose, there was only one outcome: death. They felt sorry for the lives of their disciples, but there was nothing they could do. As Yinsheng received the news of Xiao Chen's arrival, Xiao Chen also slowly walked into Taisong City at this time. One man and one sword, holding the dustless sword, Yinsheng walked into the city. At the same time, warriors from various major forces appeared in front of Xiao Chen. They stretched from the city gate to the center of the city. Nobody knew how many people there were. This was what Yinsheng had prepared for Xiao Chen. On the Dark Ghost Continent, the elites of various major forces were now gathered here to stop Xiao Chen. Looking at the formation in front of him, Xiao Chen did not hesitate. He did not stop and continued to walk into the city. Just as Xiao Chen walked along the street and slowly entered the encirclement of the crowd, an elder behind Xiao Chen finally could not help but attack. Die! With a furious roar, the elder immediately stabbed out with his sword. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2108. The old man was the first to make a move. He was an elder of a major force in the Ghost Continent. His cultivation base was at the Immoral Emperor realm. Although he knew that he was no match for Xiao Chen, he still chose to make a move. The old man was the first to make a move. He was an elder of a major force in the Ghost Continent. He was an Immoral Emperor. Although he knew that he was no match for Xiao Chen, he still chose to make a move. This was something that couldn't be helped. Or it could be said that the old man didn't have any other choice. Given his Yinsheng's character, he knew what would happen if he ran away. At that time, not only him, but also his family members wouldn't be able to escape. For the sake of his family, the old man chose to make a move despite knowing that he was no match for Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen didn't show any mercy when facing the old man who attacked him from behind. The jianyi in his hand flashed. Xiao Chen's long sword instantly pierced through the old man's chest, killing him on the spot. Although the old man had his own difficulties, it couldn't be the reason for Xiao Chen to kill him. Moreover, Xiao Chen's purpose of coming to Taisong City was to rescue Xiao Xiao. As for other things, Xiao Chen didn't care and didn't have the time to care about them. Xiao Chen killed the old man with a single slash of his sword. At the same time, many warriors around Xiao Chen also attacked at the same time, all of them shouting angrily. Kill! Their battle cries shook the sky. In the face of Yinsheng's threat, everyone present had no way to retreat. The only thing they could do was to capture Xiao Chen. That was all. Xiao Chen's expression didn't change in the face of the crowd's attack. He muttered softly. Sword Realm. Along with Xiao Chen's voice, the Sword Realm was unleashed instantly, completely shrouding everyone in it. Those who were shrouded by the Sword Realm were directly killed by the sharp sword qi in the Sword Realm. Although those who had a higher cultivation base desperately blocked the attack of the sword qi, they were also under tremendous pressure. Moreover, the sword world didn't only have the sword aura. The floating blood swords were the truly terrifying part of the sword world. His footsteps did not stop as he continued to make his way into the city. Under Xiao Chen's control, the blood-red sword in the sword world constantly killed the cultivators who wanted to attack him. These martial artists were nothing in front of Xiao Chen. They were too weak. Facing Shuijian's attack, very few people could block it. Furthermore, even if they managed to block the first attack, no one would be able to block the next attack. Countless blood swords whizzed through the air. Blood splattered everywhere as cultivators were killed one after another. Xiao Chen obviously didn't have much time to waste on them at this time. He only wanted to save Xiao Xiao. Moreover, Xiao Chen also knew that these people were just a group of small fries. The real trouble was Yinsheng and his master, Litian. They were the biggest obstacle for Xiao Chen to save Xiao Xiao. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't want to waste too much effort on this group of small fries. Since they wanted to die, he would fulfill their wish. As the blood swords whizzed past, corpses fell one after another. Such a terrifying massacre caused the place where Xiao Chen walked past to become a river of blood. Corpses piled up on both sides of the road. Wherever he passed, the ground was covered with corpses and blood. In less than 10 minutes, Taisong's city was like a purgatory on earth. On the other hand, Xiao Chen's sword realm was like a huge millstone, continuously crushing the lives of everyone around it. The terrifying massacre made people feel terrified. Some people began to hesitate, but at least so far, no one dared to run away because everyone knew the consequences of running away. Everyone knew the consequences of running away, so even in the face of the terrifying Xiao Chen, no one dared to run away. In their view, although Xiao Chen was terrifying, Yinsheng was even more terrifying and extremely ruthless. More and more cultivators attacked Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen had been persisting in using Sword Realm, which naturally consumed a lot of his spiritual power. Fortunately, under the cover of Sword Realm, this group of mobs couldn't stop Xiao Chen's footsteps at all. As more and more people died in the hands of Xiao Chen went deeper into the city. However, as he got closer to Yinsheng's mansion, the attacks Xiao Chen encountered became fiercer. None of the cultivators could stop Xiao Chen. At the same time, the situation of the battle in the city had also reached Yinsheng's ears. A middle-aged man of a mortal emperor realm knelt on one knee in front of Yinsheng with a sorrowful expression and begged. "Young master, Xiao Chen isn't someone that we can fight. Countless people have died. I hope young master can help us. Otherwise, we won't be able to stop him." This middle-aged man was also from one of the major forces on the Dark Ghost continent. Seeing that the disciples of his sect were killed by Xiao Chen one after another, he braced himself and came to beg Yinsheng to help to reduce the losses of the major sections. However, upon hearing this, Yinsheng sneered and said, "Of course you can't stop him. I've already guessed it. I never thought of asking you to stop him." Yinsheng had long known that this group of mobs wouldn't be able to stop Xiao Chen. From the beginning, he had never thought of relying on them. To put it bluntly, the reason why he asked these people to stop Xiao Chen was because he was bored. In Yinsheng's eyes, the life and death of these ants had nothing to do with him. He wouldn't feel anything no matter how many of them died. Upon hearing Yinsheng's words, the middle-aged man's eyes turned red. If he still didn't know that Yinsheng was playing with their lives, he would have lived in vain. The lives of countless people were just a farce in Yinsheng's eyes. The moment he thought of this, the middle-aged man couldn't hold back his anger. He immediately stood up and shouted angrily. "Yinsheng, ever since you and your master took control of the Ghostine continent, we have obeyed you and your master. However, you don't care about our lives at all. You have humiliated us wantonly. We are also human beings. We are living beings, not ants on the ground." The middle-aged man's anger finally exploded. However, upon hearing his words, Yinsheng, who was sitting on the main seat, frowned slightly. A cold glint flashed across his eyes. Sensing the cold glint in Yinsheng's eyes, an old man among the sect leaders hurriedly walked out and knelt down. "Young master, please spare his life. He was just angry. This is not what he wanted." This elder was the sect leader of the middle-aged man's sect. However, before he could finish speaking, a black chi had already entered the middle-aged man's body. After which, the middle-aged man let out a miserable shriek. Immediately, his entire body seemed to have been forcefully melted, leaving only a pool of blood on the ground. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2109. Yinsheng did not give the old man any chance to explain. Before he could finish speaking, Yinsheng had already killed the middle-aged man. Yinsheng did not give the old man any chance to explain. Before he could finish speaking, Yinsheng had already killed the middle-aged man. An extremely sorrowful expression flashed across the old man's eyes when he saw the middle-aged man turn into a pool of blood in front of him. At the same time, Yinsheng, who was sitting on the main seat, spoke coldly. "Noisy. You're courting death." What the middle-aged man said was indeed what Yinsheng was thinking. However, given Yinsheng's character, he deserved to die for daring to openly disobey him. After cursing in a low voice, Yinsheng's gaze swept across the crowd. After which, he spoke in an indifferent voice, I do not wish to hear those words from before. If anyone still has any doubts, you can speak now. I will give them a satisfactory answer." Hearing Yinxing's words, the various headmasters and sect masters present all grew silent. They were naturally dissatisfied in their hearts. However, they did not dare to reveal their dissatisfaction in the slightest. They understood Yinxing's temperament. His answer would naturally be to kill them. Yinxing nodded in satisfaction when he saw that no one dared to speak again. He did not need these people to submit to him willingly. After all, Yinxing was only using them as tools. As long as there was a need, Yinxing could sacrifice them at any time. Hence, it did not matter if they submitted to him willingly or not. The killing intent on Yinxing's side caused many sect leaders to not dare to refute. At the same time, on the other side, Xiaochen relied on the terrifying power of the Sword Realm to continuously penetrate deeper into Taisong City. The entire Taisong City had already turned into a living hell. Corpses piled up into mountains and rivers of blood flowed. Such a terrifying massacre caused some of the more timid cultivators to begin to flee. They had no choice. They had never seen such a scene in their entire lives. Faced with Xiaochen, who was like a god of death, some people began to flee. Moreover, after the first person fled, a second person quickly followed. As a result, more and more people chose to flee. Xiaochen didn't care about these people who chose to escape. Since they had chosen to escape, then let them be. It was fine as long as they didn't stop him. Along the way, Xiaochen successfully killed his way to the outside of Yinxing's mansion. At this moment, the door was wide open as if it was welcoming Xiaochen. At this point, the numerous cultivators who had been surrounding Xiaochen did not continue to attack. Seeing this, Xiaochen could not be bothered with them and walked into the courtyard. Upon entering the courtyard, Xiaochen immediately saw Yinxing walking out from the main hall. Yinxing coldly laughed when he saw Xiaochen. "You didn't expect that we would meet again so soon, right? Cut the crap. Where is Xiao Xiao?" Hearing this, Xiaochen coldly replied. Xiaochen had no intention of talking nonsense with Yinxing. Hearing Xiaochen's cold reply, Yinxing didn't care. He slowly walked in front of Xiaochen and said with a sneer, "Actually, I have been wondering if there's any fool in this world who would jump into a trap when they know it is. But now, it seems that such a fool does exist in this world." Previously, Yinxing wasn't sure if Xiaochen would appear. After all, if he were in Xiaochen's shoes, he would definitely not appear if he encountered such a situation. Knowing that it was a trap but still wanting to jump into it, Yinxing would definitely not do such a foolish thing. However, now that Xiaochen was standing in front of him, Yinxing had to believe that there really was such a fool in this world who would jump into a trap when they knew it was a trap. Hearing Yinxing's words, Xiaochen coldly laughed and said, "We have something that you don't." Yinxing naturally didn't know why Xiaochen was here, nor did he know about the relationship between Xiaochen and Xiao Xiao. Yinxing was a person who had never had a friend. Moreover, Yinliqian had instilled in him the idea that strength was paramount a long time ago. In order to obtain strength, he would even kill his own parents. How could you expect such a person to go through water and tread on fire for a friend? Xiaochen knew that Yinxing wouldn't understand why he would jump into a trap when he knew it was a trap. Hearing this, Yinxing coldly laughed and said, "Forget it, it doesn't matter. Anyway, you are already here. However, if you want to save Xiao Xiao, it will depend on whether you have the ability." Hearing Yinxing's words, Xiaochen didn't say anything else and directly slashed out with his sword. If he wanted to save Xiao Xiao, he naturally had to break through Yinxing. Facing Xiaochen's sudden attack, Yinxing was clearly prepared. He reacted immediately and threw out a punch, fiercely colliding with the tip of Xiaochen's sword. When the two of them collided, the entire courtyard was almost razed to the ground. Many warriors in the surroundings were directly swallowed by the terrifying aftershock and died on the spot. Xiao Xiao, who was living in the backyard, naturally felt the aftershock of such a terrifying and unbridled attack. Xiao Xiao, who was living in the backyard, naturally felt the aftershock as well. she looked in the direction of the front courtyard with a complicated gaze. Because Xiao Zhao's courtyard was protected by the symbol array that Yinxing had left behind, it wasn't affected much. However, judging from the aftershock, Xiaochen had obviously come. In order to save her, Xiaochen was willing to come to Taisong City alone. This made Xiao Xiao very touched, but at the same time, she was also very worried. Her mood was very complicated. Looking in the direction of the front courtyard, Xiao Xiao softly muttered, "Why did you come, fool?" Xiao Xiao didn't want Xiaochen to take the risk. Unfortunately, Xiaochen still came in the end. Moreover, he had already started fighting with Yinsheng. Xiao Xiao was worried about Xiaochen. However, at this time, Xiaochen already had no way to retreat. He had already started fighting with Yinsheng. After one move, neither of them had the upper hand. After another fight, Yinsheng had clearly learned his lesson this time. He didn't dare to be careless and complacent. Before Xiaochen could continue to attack, Yinsheng had already taken the initiative to attack Xiaochen. Holding a long black spear, the spear was like a dragon. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he shouted at Xiaochen, "Xiaochen, this time, I won't do what I did last time." Obviously, Yinsheng had learned his lesson. In this regard, Xiaochen also knew that the battle with Yinsheng this time would be even more stressful. In fact, this was the terrifying thing about supreme talents. In the Great Thousand World, the supreme talents had such a high status. It wasn't because of their strength, but because of their learning ability. Every monstrous genius had a very strong learning ability. After realizing their mistakes, these monstrous geniuses would be able to correct them in a very short period of time and even improve further. This was the terrifying thing about monstrous geniuses. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 21:10. After his previous failure, Xiaochen knew that Yinsheng would not make the same mistake again. Although experience could not be made up for in a short period of time, it was easy for Yinsheng to become arrogant and complacent in battle. This was not something that was difficult for Yinsheng to change. Therefore, Yinsheng would definitely not repeat the same mistake as last time. Dense earth terminus chi revolved around the spear. As he thrust it forward, a black dragon roared as it charged towards Xiaochen. Faced with Yinsheng's attack, Xiaochen did not choose to dodge. Instead, he chose to meet it head-on. With a swing of his sword, their attacks collided violently. This was already their second battle. Both of them had a certain understanding of each other. Therefore, the moment they attacked, both of them unleashed their full strength without holding back at all. Yinsheng's earth terminus body and Xiaochen's sword body completely erupted at this moment. In an instant, due to their battle, the entire mansion was completely destroyed and turned into ruins. Only the courtyard that Xiao Xiao lived in remained unscathed due to the protection of the formation. Because the entire mansion had been completely destroyed, there were no walls or houses to block the view. Although Xiao Xiao, who was in the courtyard, could not leave the matrix, she could still see Xiaochen fighting fiercely with Yinsheng through the matrix. Xiao Xiao's eyes were filled with worry as he watched the intense battle between the two. He was not afraid that Xiaochen would not be Yinsheng's match. After spending so much time with Xiaochen, Xiao Xiao was well aware of how terrifying his junior brother's talent and battle prowess were. Without mentioning anything else, just Xiaochen's cultivation speed alone made Xiao Xiao feel ashamed of his inferiority. Although Xiao Xiao's improvement over the past few years was not small, compared to Xiaochen, it was nothing. This was because Xiaochen's cultivation had completely caught up to Xiao Xiao and was now on par with him. To be able to catch up to him in such a short period of time, Xiao Xiao had always believed that Xiaochen could be ranked at the top even among all the monstrous geniuses. Xiaochen did not need to worry too much about his battle with Yinsheng. Xiao Xiao was obviously not worried about this, but Yin lit Yin. To put it bluntly, Yinsheng was nothing, at least in the eyes of Xiaochen and Xiao Xiao. At best, they were evenly matched and could not do anything to each other. However, Yinsheng's master, Yin lit Yin, was different. He was a genuine emperor-level figure. Moreover, Yin Litian was currently in Tiansong City, while Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and the others had not entered the Wood Realm yet. For Xiao. In the face of an Emperor Realm Master, in the face of absolute strength, no matter what kind of conspiracy one had, they would be powerless. Unless one had the strength to contend with an Emperor Realm Master, everything would be in vain. Xiao Chen and the others obviously did not have the strength to contend with Yin Litian at this time. Therefore, Yin Litian's threat could not be resolved for Xiao Chen and the others. Xiao didn't know how Xiao Chen was going to rescue him under the nose of Yin Litian. But in his opinion, no matter what method Xiao Chen came up with, it was almost impossible for him to succeed. Therefore, Xiao didn't want Xiao Chen to come to Taisong City to rescue him from the bottom of his heart. However, it was meaningless to talk about this now. Xiao Chen was already here. It was impossible for him to leave now. He could only watch the fierce battle between Xiao Chen and Yin Sheng. His cultivation was sealed, and there was also the barrier of the talisman array. Xiao could not help at all. Under Xiao Zhao's watch, the battle between Xiao Chen and Yin Sheng entered a white-hot stage. Xiao Chen's body was surrounded by countless blood swords, while Yin Sheng's body was shrouded in a dense earth terminus aura. Both of them displayed terrifying power. However, after a fierce battle, Xiao Chen took the initiative to display his killing move. Xiao Chen looked at Yin Sheng and shouted in a low voice. Emperor's Sword. As Xiao Chen spoke, the surrounding blood swords seemed to be summoned by something. They gathered in front of Xiao Chen. Then, under Yin Sheng's eyes, a huge sword that emitted a dazzling blood-red light slowly took shape in front of Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen had never used the Emperor's Sword before. This was also the strongest sword move that Xiao Chen had mastered. It was derived from the sword body, and only Xiao Chen could use it. When the Emperor's Sword was formed, Xiao Chen seemed to have turned into a giant Jianyi. The two of them merged into one. Immediately, the huge blood-red sword attacked Yin Sheng. Facing Xiao Chen's Emperor's Sword, Yin Sheng's expression was no longer calm. His eyes finally revealed a trace of seriousness. Before the attack arrived, the terrifying power had already caused Yin Sheng to feel a chill down his spine. The power of Xiao Chen's attack was definitely not to be underestimated. At the very least, it was enough to kill him. This sword was Xiao Chen's trump card. There was no way to dodge it. If Yin Sheng took it head-on, he did not know what the result would be. Of course, Yin Sheng definitely had his own killing move. In the current situation, Yin Sheng had no choice but to display his killing move to defend himself. Otherwise, he would not be able to block Xiao Chen's Emperor's Sword. Devouring heaven and earth. With a furious roar, the earth terminus energy around Yin Sheng completely erupted. It surrounded the long spear in his hand and continuously gathered. As the spear pierced out, a dense black aura covered the sky. In an instant, the entire sky of Taisong City darkened. It was as if the sun was covered by this dark aura. Both of them had displayed their strongest killing moves. Obviously, they wanted to decide the outcome of the battle with a single blow. Very soon, the attacks of the two collided violently. The sky collapsed and the earth caved in. The space was directly torn apart. A 1,000-foot-wide spatial crack appeared in the sky above Taisong City. A terrifying spatial storm raged out from it. Heavens! The sky has split open. None of the surviving warriors in Taisong City had ever seen such a huge spatial crack. For a moment, all of them stood motionless on the spot, as if they were under a spell. They stared at the huge spatial crack in the sky, dumbfounded. Heavens! The sky has split open, the sky seemed to have been torn apart. The huge spatial crack had divided the sky above Taisong City into two. The whistling sound emitted by the violent void storm was like the howling of hell at this moment. Everyone was stunned. But soon, many of them were swept away by the void storm before they could even react. They did not have the slightest strength to resist. Please collect, please vote, please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 21:11. Due to the collision between Xiaochen and Yinsheng, a 1,000-foot-long spatial crack was torn open in the sky. Due to the collision between Xiaochen and Yinsheng, a 1,000-foot-long spatial crack was torn open in the sky. In the face of such a scene, many people were stunned. While they were snorting coldly, the eruption of the void storm instantly devoured countless lives. Seeing that more and more people were being devoured by the void storm, the sect leaders and sect masters of the various major forces could not care about anything else at this moment. They all shouted loudly, "Run!" The aftermath and destruction caused by Xiaochen and Yinsheng's attack was not something that warriors of their level could withstand. Even experts with cultivation in the comprehension state would find it difficult to withstand it. Along with the shouts of the sect leaders and sect masters, the crowd finally reacted and scattered in all directions. Everyone wanted to get away from this hell. The entire Taisong city was almost completely destroyed. Except for a few places that were protected by arrays, the rest of the buildings were completely razed to the ground. Xiaochen and Yinsheng did not pay attention to the surrounding people. At this moment, both of them had displayed their respective trump cards. The battle had also reached the most critical moment, so the two of them could not afford to be distracted. Both of them exerted their full strength without holding back. Their bodies were also cut open by the terrifying spiritual energy. Such a head-on collision without holding back was very dangerous even for Yinsheng and Xiaochen. In the head-on collision, Yinsheng felt that Xiaochen did not hold back at all. On the contrary, his strength was increasing. He wants to die together? At this point, Xiaochen still had no intention of stopping. If this continued, there would only be one result, which was that both of them would suffer, or even die together. Anyway, even if they did not die, they would definitely be seriously injured, and there might even be irreversible damage. Could it be that Xiaochen saw that there was no hope of saving Xiao Xiao, so he decided to fight to the death with Yinsheng? Thinking that he had guessed Xiaochen's thoughts, Yinsheng's eyes were filled with coldness as he said, "Xiaochen, you're crazy. If this continues, both of us will die." "What? Are you afraid?" Xiaochen sneered when he heard Yinsheng's words. Seeing that Xiaochen was not moved at all, Yinsheng could only curse in his heart, "Lunatic." Xiaochen looked like he was ready to fight to the death. Compared to Xiaochen, Yinsheng was much more conservative. He had no reason to fight Xiaochen to the death. In other words, Yinsheng was reluctant to exchange his life for Xiaochen's. He didn't want to die yet. It could be said that Yinsheng's fear of death had caused a trace of cowardice to appear in his heart. Because of this trace of cowardice, Yinsheng had chosen to take the initiative to withdraw his attack. He didn't want to fight to the death with Xiaochen. Moreover, Yinsheng also knew that his master, Yin, was in Taisong City. Even if he lost, Xiaochen couldn't kill him. By taking the initiative to withdraw his attack, it could be said that Yinsheng had already admitted his failure. In this way, Xiaochen naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. In other words, Xiaochen had been waiting for this opportunity. Just when Yinsheng chose to withdraw his attack, a trace of coldness flashed in Xiaochen's eyes. Then, he increased the power in his hand again and blasted it fiercely at Yinsheng. Yinsheng had already known that this would be the result if he withdrew his attack, so he wasn't surprised by Xiaochen's action at all. He blocked Xiaochen's attack, and at the same time, he took the initiative to retreat. Yinsheng chose to retreat. In this way, although he avoided the result of fighting to the death with Xiaochen, this retreat also made him lose the possibility of continuing to fight with Xiaochen. In a battle between warriors, especially a fierce battle between two people with similar cultivation and strength, sometimes victory and defeat could be decided in an instant. Yinsheng's retreat meant that he had already lost. Just as Yinsheng dodged Xiaochen's terrifying attack, Xiaochen's emperor's sword instantly blasted a huge deep hole in the ground. Although Yinsheng dodged the attack, just as he stabilized his body, Xiaochen had already appeared in front of him. At the same time, the long sword in his hand was already firmly pressed against Yinsheng's throat. "I said that we have something that you don't have." Xiaochen's gaze returned to calmness as he looked at Yinsheng and said faintly. At this moment, as long as Xiaochen wanted to, he could take Yinsheng's life at any time. However, Xiaochen didn't do so because Xiaochen was waiting for someone to appear. Yinsheng, who didn't know what Xiaochen was thinking, shouted coldly with an indignant look on his face. "So what? Do you dare to kill me?" Yinsheng knew that he would lose the moment he became timid. However, because of the existence of his master, Yinsheng wasn't worried that Xiaochen would kill him. Knowing where Yinsheng's confidence came from, Xiaochen didn't refute it because this was the truth. With Yinlidian around, he really couldn't kill Yinsheng. However, after hearing Yinsheng's words, Xiaochen still snorted. "To think that you're already a supreme talent. To be honest, you're still far from being a supreme talent. Which supreme talent in the Great Thousand World doesn't have a noble status and a strong background? However, who would use their status and background to talk? In terms of background, any supreme talent in the Great Thousand World isn't inferior to you, Yinsheng." However, they never care about this, and they won't put their lives in the hands of others, even if that person is their master. If you can't even take charge of your own life, how can you still have the face to call yourself a supreme talent? Yinsheng relied on Yinlidian, but Xiaochen looked down on his way of doing things. If it was Jun Wuya who attacked Yinsheng today, then it was understandable that Yinsheng relied on Yinlidian. After all, the two of them weren't on the same level at all. However, Yinsheng was facing Xiaochen today, who was also a supreme talent of the younger generation like him. Facing someone of the same generation, Yinsheng still had to rely on Yinlidian and even put his life in Yinlitian's hands. This made Xiaochen look down on Yinlidian. All supreme talents had their own pride, and Yinsheng lacked such pride. Perhaps in his opinion, this was a choice to achieve his goal by fair means or foul. However, in Xiaochen's opinion, this was cowardice and fear. After hearing Xiaochen's words, Yinsheng's face turned ashen. However, this time, Xiaochen didn't give him a chance to speak. As soon as he finished speaking, he looked directly at the center of the city, where the main hall was still intact. "Am I right, Senior Dizun?" As soon as he finished speaking, an amused laughter was heard from the main hall. "Ha, little fellow, you're quite interesting. You're indeed a supreme talent of the sword sect. I agree with what you said earlier. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 21:12. Yinlitian's voice also appeared in front of Xiaochen. He looked at Xiaochen with great interest, and there was even a faint smile on his face. He didn't look as cold as before. Xiaochen was facing Yinlidian again, and this time, he was facing him at close range. However, after being scrutinized by Yinlidian for a while, Xiaochen remained calm. After sizing up Xiaochen, Yinlidian finally turned to look at Yinsheng. The smile on his face disappeared, and his voice turned cold as he said, "This little guy is right. You don't deserve to be called a supreme talent yet. You should know that you can only rely on yourself in a battle. It's naive and foolish to put your life in the hands of others." After berating Yinsheng mercilessly, Yinsheng didn't dare to say a word in the face of Yinlitian's angry roar. He lowered his head and didn't say a word. Just as Xiaochen had said, Yinsheng's performance this time had disappointed Yinlitian. If Yinsheng's defeat to Xiaochen was due to his lack of experience and carelessness, then Yinsheng's defeat this time was entirely due to his own cowardice. Yinsheng had lost to Xiaochen because of his cowardice and fear. Otherwise, if Yinsheng had been like Xiaochen and fought to the end without fear of death, the outcome would have been different. It was hard to say who would win, but Yinsheng would not have been defeated by Xiaochen so easily. In this battle, Xiaochen had once again taught Yinsheng a lesson. In order to become a genius, one must not only have extraordinary talent and combat strength, but also have the determination and courage to press forward. In the face of any difficulty or danger, one must have the courage to face it head-on and not choose to run away. After rebuking Yinsheng, Yinlitian turned to look at Xiaochen and said indifferently, "Let him go. With me here, you can't kill him." "I know." Yinlitian gestured for Xiaochen to release Yinsheng. Upon hearing this, Xiaochen nodded and released the blood sword in his hand. Yinsheng was stunned when he saw Xiaochen let him go so easily. Yin Litian asked curiously. You let him go so easily? You should know that Yinsheng is your only bargaining chip. If you let him go, you won't have the right to negotiate with me. Yinsheng had been in Xiaochen's hands previously. According to Yin Litian's original plan, Xiaochen would definitely use Yinsheng to negotiate with him, such as letting Xiao Xiao, Li Chan, and Dao Ju go. However, Xiao did not hesitate and let Yinsheng go without hesitation. This was equivalent to giving up his only bargaining chip. Yin Litian was a little surprised by Xiaochen's decision. That was why he said this. Upon hearing Yin Litian's words, Xiaochen removed the sword realm and put away the dustless sword. He smiled bitterly and said, Even if Yinsheng is in my hands, will you still negotiate with me? Xiaochen replied with a question instead of an answer. Yin Litian was taken aback at first, but he soon burst into laughter. Ha, you little guy. Interesting, very interesting. Xiaochen's question had indeed hit the nail on the head. Indeed, even if Xiaochen had Yinsheng in his hands, Yin Litian wouldn't negotiate with him. This was without a doubt because Yin Litian was a person who wouldn't be threatened by anyone. Moreover, Xiaochen also knew that Yin Litian was a person who believed in strength. Anyone who tried to stop him would be killed mercilessly. He would even kill his own clansmen with his own hands. Why would he care about a mere Yinsheng? Although Yinsheng was Yin Litian's disciple, it was too whimsical to think that he could use Yinsheng to force Yin Litian to submit. Xiaochen knew this from the very beginning. That was why he didn't hesitate to release Yinsheng. Yin Litian became even more curious about Xiaochen. He looked at Xiaochen with a smile and asked, Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you if you release Yinsheng? Senior, will you? Xiaochen asked again. This time, he did not wait for Yin Litian to speak. He quickly explained, Don't worry about it. Senior, you captured Xiao Xiao, Li Chan, Dao Ju, and this junior. I'm afraid your purpose is to deal with Senior Li Xiao and the others who are about to arrive. After all, with the four of us in your hands, it's obviously very advantageous to you. Therefore, you won't kill me, right? Xiao Xiao was captured alive. According to Xiaochen's guess, Li Chun and Dao Ju shouldn't be in any danger because Yin Litian still needed them alive for the time being. Xiaochen had seen through Yu Litian's thoughts. Yu Litian wasn't angry at all. Instead, he nodded and smiled with approval. Not bad, you're right. Ha, I'm getting more and more interested in you. Since that's the case, I don't think I need to say anything else. You should know what to do. Junior naturally understands. However, I still have a request that I hope you can agree to. Xiaochen nodded and replied. What Yin Litian wanted Xiaochen to do was very simple. He had to stay in Taisong City for a period of time and wait for Li Xiao and the others to arrive. Only after they reached a certain agreement with Yin Litian would he release them. To put it bluntly, the four of them were bargaining chips in Yin Litian's hand. He wanted to use them to deal with Li Xiao and the others. Xiaochen knew what Yin Litian wanted. Similarly, Xiaochen had his own conditions. Yin Litian didn't refuse this time. He looked at Xiaochen with a calm smile and said, Speak. Junior hopes to stay with Xiao Xiao, Dao Ju, and Li Chun. This request doesn't cross your bottom line, right? Xiaochen said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Even if they were to be imprisoned, the four of them had to stay together. This was Xiaochen's only request. Upon hearing Xiaochen's request, Yin Litian nodded without hesitation. Okay, I agree. With that, Yin Litian pointed a finger at Xiaochen, sealing his cultivation base completely. At the same time, Yin Sheng, who was standing to the side, heard that Yin Litian had agreed to Xiaochen's request and hurriedly said, Master, Yin Sheng naturally didn't wish for Xiaochen and the others to be imprisoned together. He wanted to be alone with Xiao Xiao. However, as soon as Yin Sheng spoke, Yin Litian interrupted mercilessly. All right, this matter is settled. Don't say anything else. Also, I'm very disappointed in your performance today. Think about it carefully. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 21:13. Lydian didn't even give Sheng a chance to speak. To be honest, Sheng's performance today had indeed disappointed him. Sheng had actually become timid during the battle with Xiao Chen. This was something that Lydian hadn't expected. Facing Xiao Chen, who was of the same generation as him, Sheng had actually become timid. Lydian naturally knew what this meant. Compared to Sheng's disappointment, Lydian was more interested in Xiao Chen. He hadn't met such an interesting little guy in a long time. After being scolded by Lydian, Sheng naturally didn't dare to refute. He lowered his head and nodded. Yes. Although Sheng appeared to be very respectful on the surface, Xiao Chen knew that Sheng was definitely not convinced in his heart. However, this had nothing to do with him. Lydian agreed to his request. Immediately after, Lydian personally led Xiao Xiao out. Together with Xiao Chen, the four of them were sent to the dungeon. Due to the fierce battle between Sheng and Xiao Chen, almost the entire Tiansong city had been turned into ruins. However, there were still some places that weren't affected, including the Great Hall where Lydian was located. With Lydian's strength, it wasn't difficult for him to withstand the aftermath of the battle between Xiao Chen and Sheng. He personally led Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao out of the dungeon. At this time, Xiao Xiao was supporting Xiao Chen with a concerned expression. At the same time, she said in a somewhat reproachful tone, "You knew it was a trap, yet you still came?" Xiao Xiao somewhat blamed Xiao Chen for his recklessness. However, Xiao Chen simply smiled in response and didn't take it to heart. In fact, Xiao Chen had thought about a lot of things before coming to Taisong City, especially about Lydian. Xiao Chen thought about it over and over again. After confirming that Lydian's goal wasn't their lives, Xiao Chen rushed to Taisong City. Before coming here, Xiao Chen had already guessed that Lydian's purpose in capturing the four of them was not to take their lives, but to have some bargaining chips in his hands when he met Li Xiao. In this way, even if they were captured by Lydian, the four of them should not be in any danger. It was precisely because of this that Xiao Chen took the risk to come to Taisong City. Otherwise, how could Xiao Chen appear so rashly? Xiao Chen was confident that lunar calendar wouldn't harm the four of them, at least for the time being. Seeing Xiao Chen's calm and confident appearance, Xiao Xiao couldn't help but laugh. You're always like this." Xiao Chen's calmness and indifference gave Xiao Xiao more confidence. The two of them were personally led by Lydian to the dungeon below the main hall. There, they saw Li Chun and Dao Ju, who had been captured at the beginning. Looking at the two of them, although they were captured by Lydian, they didn't seem to have suffered any injuries and seemed to be in good spirits. Seeing Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao appear, Li Chun and Dao Ju were stunned, and Dao Ju even blurted out, "All right, everyone's here now." Over the past few days, Li Chun and Dao Ju had already figured out Lydian's goal, so the two of them had accepted their fate. What could they do? In the face of an Emperor Realm Master, there was no way for them to escape. Moreover, their cultivations had long been sealed by Lydian. Even if they wanted to escape, they would not be able to do so without their cultivation. Hearing Dao Ju's words, Xiao Xiao rolled her eyes at him, while Lydian looked at Xiao Chen and said, "Rest here for a few days. Rest well here for a few days. When the time comes, someone will come to pick you up." Since Xiao Chen and the others had already guessed his intentions, Lydian didn't hide it anymore. In fact, there was no point in hiding it. Lydian had captured the four of them so that he could have more bargaining chips when he faced Li Xiao in the future. Now that Xiao Chen and the others were in his hands, Lydian might as well admit it openly. Moreover, with him personally overseeing the main hall, Lydian didn't believe that the four of them would be able to escape under his watch. Hearing Lydian's words, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao took the initiative to enter the cell. Lydian didn't go back on his words and indeed imprisoned the four of them together. Then, Lidian left, leaving only Xiao Chen and the others in the dungeon. Seeing Xiao Chen enter the cell, Dao Ju took the initiative to put his arm around Xiao Chen's shoulder and said with a sly smile, "Brother Xiao Chen, you don't know how long I've been waiting for you. It's so boring to be with this blockhead every day." The blockhead Dao Ju was talking about was naturally Li Chun. This guy was simply a taciturn gourd. He didn't say many words a day, which made Dao Ju feel suffocated. Hearing Dao Ju's words, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly and helplessly. As for Xiao Xiao, she said unhappily, "All right, everyone is here. All right, now that everyone is gathered, let's see how those big shots deal with this." The lives of Xiao Chen and the others were now in the hands of Lidian, Li Xiao, and the other Emperor Realm Masters. Hearing this, Dao Ju smiled bitterly and helplessly. "I never thought that I would have such a day. Alas, I don't know if my old man knows about this. It seems that when I go back, I won't be able to avoid a round of physical pain." Saber Ju said with a bitter face. When he mentioned his old man, Saber Ju felt extremely helpless. That old man was a stubborn old man. Being imprisoned together, the four of them knew that they had now become chess pieces in the game of Lidian, Li Xiao, and the other Emperor Realm Masters. As the supreme talents of the Great Thousand World, they could only be chess pieces in the hands of the Emperor Realm Masters. The current situation was no longer something that Xiao Chen and the others could control. The final outcome could only be determined by Lidian, Li Xiao, and the other Emperor Realm Masters. Having thought this through, the four of them had no choice but to take things as they came. In any case, Lidian was not too bad to the four of them. At least there was good wine and food. In the cell, the four of them sat together and drank, patiently waiting for Li Xiao to come. At the same time, in the main hall, Lidian smiled faintly when he sensed the four of them drinking. These boys have good temperaments. As the supreme talents of the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen and the others had good temperaments. If they were ordinary people who encountered such a situation, they would have been extremely nervous. How could they be like the four of them, drinking and talking at the same time without the slightest hint of nervousness? Being prisoners in a cell, the four of them could still talk and laugh. This was indeed difficult for ordinary people to do. The four of them were very smart, and Lidian was very satisfied with this. As long as the four of them didn't try to escape, Lidian wouldn't make things difficult for them. After all, Lidian's goal wasn't their lives. Killing them wouldn't benefit Lidian at all. Please add this to your collection, monthly vote, and recommendation. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.